Probably need to get him a gavel and let him strike once. I will give you, this isn't really law school, this is just informational. But by and large, the number of strikes when they open court indicates the number of judges on the bench. If they strike, then they open, it will be a 3-judge appellate panel. If they strike 5 times, Tennessee Supreme Court. The exception is, I think, and I haven't checked on it, but I've had the pleasure to be in the audience at the United States Supreme Court. Matter of fact, I've been there twice. Once I was introduced as a member of the bar. I don't think they strike 9 times, but generally the number of strikes has to do with the number of judges. Okay? A little more information. We now know broadly about hearsay, 404B, discovery, and now the number of strikes in opening the court. So, all right, we're ready to continue. Defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
State ready to proceed?
Yes,
All right, call your next.
Terry Dicus.
you know that.
Mr. Dykes, raise your right hand. solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Be seated, state your name, first and last, and spell it for the court reporter.
Terry Dicus, Terry Dicus.
And Mr. Dicus, how are you currently employed?
I'm an attorney in Savannah, Tennessee.
And on April the 13th, 2011, how were you employed at that time?
I was a criminal investigator assigned to the 24th Judicial District. I was assigned to Hardin, Decatur, and Benton counties.
And an investigator with which entity?
Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Okay. And just to be clear, you were the case agent on this case?
Yes, ma'am. I was the original case agent.
Okay. And how many years were you the case agent?
From April 13th, 2011 until sometime in June of 2013, so a little over 2 years.
Okay. And when you left, what did you go to do?
Did you say June 2015?
No, Your Honor. I said June 2013, a little over 2 years, 2011 to 2013.
Now, in investigating this case, I'd like to direct your attention first to the investigation of Mr. Adams, since we're here today in his case. Did you, in fact, investigate Mr. Adams as part of your investigation of the disappearance of Holly Bobo?
I did.
Okay, and what were the facts that you investigated? What were the leads that you followed? Will you please just tell the jury?
Zach Adams, his name came up very early in the investigation. The first time that I remember...
Can you speak a little more into the microphone?
Yes.
Just move the microphone closer to you, if you will.
Well, the first time that I remember Mr. Adams' name coming up was about the first week of the investigation. So I sent 4 FBI agents, 2 TBI agents, and a dog team from the Shelby County Sheriff's Department to go out to a friend of his, Shane Austin. He went out to Shane Austin's house. We had information on all these. They're a little clique. The Adams, Autry, and Austin. They were supposedly together that day. So I believe that's the first thing that came up with Shane Austin. So they went out there and they interviewed him. They ran dogs through his trailer to see if these were cadaver dogs that supposedly can tell the scent of human decomposition. So they go out to this house. They go out to Austin's house, check him out. I didn't actually meet any of them at the time. I was in the command post.
Okay, so when they went to the house, what did they discover there?
Well, it was a trailer. It was a mobile home on Yellow Springs Road. And by the time they went there, we'd already found, or we didn't find it, but a citizen in Decatur County had already found some items that we know were Holly's on this road, Yellow Springs Road in northern Decatur County. So that piqued our interest even more in Mr. Austin and this whole crew.
Okay, so when the group, which investigators actually went to talk to Mr. Austin?
I can't tell you the name of the FBI guys because I'm not sure. I don't know it.
Okay,
I believe it was Joe Walker and Brent Booth that went to Austin's house originally, and Ricky M. and the Decatur County investigator. So there was 8 total investigators that went to Austin's house there initially.
and what did they do at his house?
Well, they interviewed him. They got his story. They checked out his mobile home.
When you say checked out, what do you mean by that?
Well, they searched it. He gave them consent to search, so they went all the way through his trailer. They noted that he had a rifle right there close to him, and he told them that he was a gun nut. So they talked to him, got his story, find out where he was at around the time of the kidnapping.
And did they have a dog search team there also?
Yes, ma'am. That cadaver dog team that searched, they alerted to something, and it may have been not a cadaver dog, but a biological material dog, because it allegedly alerted to a sock that was somewhere in Austin's bedroom.
And what did they determine about that sock?
Well, they believe the sock was used as a rag, for lack of a better term, a rag to clean up biological material.
And what biological material, did they reach a conclusion about what that sock had been used to clean up?
Semen, like you use it to clean up semen.
And they then asked Mr.
Your Honor, I'm object to the hearsay.
But they reached a different conclusion also about the semen.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This calls for speculation. It's some sort of scientific conclusion.
It's not.
Ask the question.
Okay, but there's something about that semen that then they didn't, and they weren't concerned about it being a rape, so what was it that they decided about that semen? Do you remember?
Okay, they determined that he was masturbating into a sock, and he was using it as a cum rag. Apologize for saying it. I don't know how to say it any different. But.
Okay, just to be clear on what the whole issue with the sock was. Okay, and then he gave an alibi that day, or he gave a statement of what he was doing. Did you check into that?
I didn't personally at that time. I was ordered to stay in the command post at all times, so that stayed for several months that I was in the command center as everybody was coming in. You got to understand, Autry Adams. You know, we had many Autry and Adamses coming in at the time. People were calling in and say, "You better check out my ex-boyfriend. He's mean. He could have done it." Okay, well that would be a lead that we'd have to follow and rule him out somehow. So there was a whole lot of information that was coming in, and I was compartmentalizing and prioritizing the information that was coming in to see what we do next.
Okay, so, but at some point, did the TBI check out his alibi?
Yes.
Okay, and then what else did you do about Mr. Adams to investigate Mr. Adams?
Mr. Adams, there was a trooper that Warren Rainey went and talked to Mr. Adams. I believe he was the first or one of the first to actually talk to Mr. Adams and check him out, see what he was doing. He came back and told some things that he noticed that were very strange, and saying y'all need to look a little further into it. So I believe it's the same group, and I don't know that I told them or they did it on their own. I believe they probably did it on their own. They went out and checked out Zach Adams. They interviewed him. They went through his house the same way. Did everything they needed to do.
And didn't the FBI go out to talk to Mr. Adams also?
I believe, yes.
Okay.
Well, they did with me one time for sure, but I know they did around the time of the kidnapping as well.
Okay, and when was the first time when's the second time that Mr. Adams was interviewed?
I don't know. I can't tell you the date.
Okay, Ricky Inman, excuse me, Ricky Inman actually interviewed Mr. Adams at some point, didn't he?
Correct.
And what was the result of that interview?
I believe that Mr. Adams told him essentially the same story that he had told before, that he was at home and with his brother and his girlfriend at the time, Rebecca Earp, and they woke up, they left, and picked up Shane Austin that morning. Okay. Shane Austin, one of his buddies, who didn't have a vehicle, and Zach's truck was supposedly tore up, so they went in Dylan's Chevrolet. They went in Dylan's Chevrolet, left where they lived. They lived on Adams Lane, which is northern Decatur County. They left sometime between 9 and 10 that morning. They pick up Shane Austin. When they pick up Shane Austin, then they go up to the interstate to where there's a gas station up there. They get gas, but gas is always high there. I agree with him. Gas is unbelievably high there. So they just put, like I believe, around $5 gas in the vehicle to go back to into Decatur County, into Decaturville, Parsons, where gas is much cheaper. So they're just putting it in right there to get them to another spot. And Adams said that at that time, Adams, Austin, and Dylan Adams all said that they noticed a wave of police cars coming down the interstate, a wave of black SUVs that were flying down the interstate. Zachary Adams.
Can I stop you right there? During this investigation, were you all able to obtain video surveillance from different businesses?
Yes.
Okay. And at one point, did you obtain some video surveillance from Ann Farm
I did.
business? Okay, I'd like to pass you some pictures.
Okay.
Now, did you spend a lot of time looking at the Ann Farm video?
Days.
Personally?
Days and weeks. Yes.
Okay. And do you recognize these pictures right here?
Yes. These are pictures taken from the Am Farm, the camera closest to the door. It's a perfect angle of the parking lot, but it also in the background catches all traffic going south and north on 641. That's what these pictures are.
Okay. And was there a time and date stamp on the Am Farm videos?
Yes, ma'am.
And those pictures right there, what time and date stamp do they have?
The first one with the one black SUV is 1104, date 4/13/2011. Sorry. The second one, 1105/01, same date, 4/13/2011, the day of the kidnapping.
Okay. And, Your Honor, I would like to have those two marked as exhibits at this
No,
point.
no objection.
215 and 216. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. We still all right on tablets? Everybody good? Let me know, okay?
So can we put the first timeline one, it's first in time, that's the second in time, I believe. So, okay, and the first in time, and let's see, we have a pointer here.
Oh,
Okay, and would you please point out the vehicle in there? What is that vehicle for the record? What does it appear to be?
that is a black SUV. I'm not sure exactly what kind. It's
Give me
either,
the location of this photo again.
it is at Am Farm. It's a pharmaceutical company in
Okay,
Decatur County.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
And,
Right there on, this is Highway 641, Highway 69.
and is it closer to Parsons or closer to the interstate and farm?
It's much closer to Parsons. It's actually, you're coming into Parsons right now as that vehicle is coming into the city limits of Parsons.
Okay. So in this picture, and I see a little tree in this picture, where is the truck in relation to that tree? The little tree in the landscaping?
The SUV,
Yes.
it's right here. This is the vehicle that you're asking me about.
Right, so is it before or after the tree?
It's after the tree.
Okay, so then if we move to the next picture. So in this picture, what do you see here?
Well, it's the same type, and it's tough to make out the kind of vehicles these are, but this is another SUV type vehicle that's right around almost even with the tree, a little bit south of even.
Okay, so it's not past the tree yet.
That's correct.
And then what about the second vehicle there?
The second one is maybe 7 car lengths behind the tree.
And so you can kind of tell the distance that they're going perhaps by the timing between the two pictures. And how many parking spaces would you say are between those two cars?
I would say perhaps 5 or 6.
Okay. And did you know something about the TBI that day and what was going on in the Jackson TBI office?
Yes, a special agent with a Medicaid fraud unit was having a retirement party in Jackson.
Okay, and so what did that mean about people, about the SUVs? How did that relate to the SUVs?
Well, this guy, he had worked there forever with all kinds of different agencies, so a large portion of the responding officers, whether it be TBI, Secret Service, FBI, they were coming from Jackson to get to the scene of the kidnapping, 681 Swan Johnson.
So to you then, would it fit with what you knew about the TBI that there would be these 3 SUVs in a row?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to go ahead and just put those into, they're already in evidence.
Yes.
Move on. We can-
215 and 216.
Okay, and then did you also have information about the kind of car that Mr. Adams was in that morning? What car did he tell you he was in that day?
It was a extended cab Chevy Silverado, black in color, I believe.
Was it black?
I don't remember. I don't remember the color.
Okay. Dark. Would you say
Dark.
it's
Might have been dark blue,
Okay,
dark
and
green.
I'd like to pass another picture up to you.
It had Georgia license plates,
Okay.
if that helps you.
Well, were you able to see any license plates when you looked at the Amazon video?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
It's much too far away, and it's not the right angle.
And what does that appear to be a picture of?
That is a extended cab, probably either GMC or Chevrolet pickup truck.
Okay, and what time is that picture made?
11:07 and 24 seconds.
Okay. And I'd like to have this marked as my next exhibit, Your Honor.
217.
Do you recognize where that picture came from?
Yes, ma'am. It's the Am Farm video from the one closest to the front door.
Okay, and can you, for the jury, point out where that pickup truck is?
Right here's the pickup truck you're referring to.
Okay. Okay, and then I think for a few minutes, we're done with the overhead projector. Okay, are there other things that you did to check out well, first of all, in your investigation, we've heard some about telephone records. What did you do to check out the telephone records?
The telephone records of,
Whose telephone records did you get copies of?
okay, the first thing we did with the telephone records is we got a tower dump for every cell phone in close to Decatur County. What a tower dump does is it tells you every bit of activity, whether somebody's receiving a call, making a call, or they're having a SMS message, anything. It tells you every bit of information for everybody in this area, which was larger than Decatur County. So that's the first thing I did. I got a search warrant for AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. I believe that's it. So we got all these search warrants. So we have all this data of if you were in Decatur County that day, we know where you were, where your cell phone was, if you used it at all.
Okay. And at some point, did you get records on Holly Bobo's cellular telephone?
Yes, ma'am. We got a search warrant for AT&T for her and everybody in her family for geolocate, which tells you where her phone is at a particular point in time.
Now, does it tell you exactly where a phone is?
It could, if this was a 3G network where they can triangulate, they'll tell you if you're using your phone, they can give you, you're at 2800 Smith Road in Savannah. Decatur County at the time, and they have since upgraded, I believe, but at the time there were a 2G network, which basically all they could tell you, a cell phone, a cellular tower has either 3 or 4 quadrants, and you know a quadrant has 120 degrees. So if they're telling you where the cell phone is, basically they're telling you the center point to that cellular quadrant, and they'll give you a confidence, you know, how confident they are that this is accurate, of however many meters, 4,000 to 7,000. So it doesn't tell you exactly where it is, but you can piece it together with looking at where her cell phone has been to make a good educated guess as to where her cell phone is at a certain time.
Okay. And did you all actually go to AT&T to get additional information about the cellular telephone network?
Actually, we had an engineer with AT&T come out to Decatur County, and he rode every road in Decatur County that had something, you know, that was important to us. So when he's riding the roads, he's got a device where he can measure which tower at the point.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your Honor, I object to this point. I think even by Mr. Dicus' own admission, he's not a cell phone expert like Mr. Frizzell is. I think he'll even acknowledge that Mr. Frizzell is a cell phone expert. So to the extent that his testimony goes into anything about cell phone
How
expertise,
it operates or anything, he can set up that somebody's driven around and things like that.
Right. That's what I'm trying to just set up, is that, so not to say exactly what the information was showing, but he was able to determine which tower the phone was hitting off of at different places in the road. Is that right?
That's correct.
And did he come up with a map that that reflected that?
And here, Judge, I think we need to hear from, like Mr. Frizzell, a cell phone expert, who can explain to us what this map is.
Well, right now, Your Honor, I'm trying just to lay the groundwork for my cell phone expert that's going to
Okay.
come in.
All right.
So, and did you come up with a map that
Showed at what point this phone was pinging off of what tower?
Yeah, but that's a little misleading.
Okay.
That map shows which tower at a certain point is utilizing that cell phone. His device was telling him which tower, you know, all the towers around Decatur County, the 4 or 5, which tower, if you're on this road right here, if you're on Cypress Hill Road, which tower are you going to be using? So that map shows which tower you're going to be using at this road. Now you drive 100 feet down the road, you may be on a different tower. But that's what that map did. That's the importance of that. We can tell each point on the route, each point on the potential route of where her cell phone would have been if it was here, which tower would it have been hitting off of.
And also, you got from AT&T a map that showed kind of the different cell phone towers and where the coverage of those cell phone towers was expected to be.
Correct.
It's a multicolored map with that showed kind of where cell tower signals faded in and out.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So then again, you were still talking about the cell phone records and with Holly's phone and how you gotten the geolocates.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
interrupted you, so can you continue from there?
I don't, we got all our cell phone. So we get all this data. We also had some pings where the Decatur County Sheriff's Department, before I got there, they had already initiated a ping, which a ping is where the cellular provider is sending out a where are you signal to the cellular provider. So we had pings starting at 8:56 that morning. Well, 8:56 they actually had no location for, but we had several pings, maybe 4 or 5 pings that day that told us where her cell phone was within that cellular quadrant. Keep in mind, it tells you the center point. It doesn't tell you anything else. But that's what we had.
Okay. And I'd like to have these two maps just passed up and marked for identification purposes.
The 218, 219 for ID only.
Okay, I want to just pass those to you and see if, do you recognize those as being the maps that were generated by AT&T?
Yes, ma'am, they are very familiar to me.
Okay, and the first one, the one that's actually when you were driving different routes, that's the one we'll have marked with the lower number.
Parsons Area 7.
Okay, is that what it says at the top?
Parsons Area 7/7/2011.
Okay, we'll pass that one first, and then the second
218.
one, what is that one?
This one is a map indicating the coverage of all these towers.
We're not going to show it
Oh.
to the jury just yet, but
Sorry. This is a map showing the overlay of the coverage of the cell towers in Decatur County.
okay, very good. Okay, and at some point, did you all get the cellular telephone records of Mr. Adams?
I believe so.
And in determining whether or not he had an alibi for any of that time, did you make any determination about that?
Well, there was one indication on his cell record that, within the tower dumps, that showed at 8:28 a.m. he was hitting off the tower that's in the northeastern portion of Decatur County, which would cover northeastern part where his residence is.
And what time was that?
I believe it was 8:28.
Okay, and then what else did you determine? Did you compare that with something else in order to try to make a determination about his alibi?
Right. His cell phone at 8:28 is hitting off a tower that's several miles from the tower that Holly's cell phone was hitting off at 8:26 a.m. So 2-minute drive time. There's no way that Zach's cell phone could have been where.
Again, I think we're getting into finding
It's outside the area of expertise.
But did you use that information
And then to make determinations in
Yes.
your investigation?
Right.
Okay, and what determination did you make at that time?
I think it's just a backdoor way of trying to get cell phone expert
He's not a
testimony
cell phone
and somebody
expert.
who's not.
Right, but about Mr. Adams' alibi, what determination did you make about his alibi?
The determination I made is that he could not have been involved in the kidnapping.
Okay, and what about Rebecca Earp? Did you mention Rebecca Earp earlier, his girlfriend?
Yes,
Okay, and did you speak with her?
I did.
When did you speak with her?
Give me a second, it's a big file. I believe it was the first time I spoke to her was probably sometime after July the 4th of 2011, because I talked to A-Train on July the 5th, 2011. So as part of
Now, you say A-Train. Who are you referring to when you say A-Train?
Jason Autry,
Okay.
I spoke to him on the July the 5th. These guys kept on coming up with for stupid reasons, saying, I'm going to put you end up like Holly, you do this, and okay, good, let's get back on them. So we checked them out several times. Around July, I said I'm going to check them out for good and ended it. So I talked to Jason Autry first with, I believe it was with my buddy Brent Booth and Joey Hudgens. We spoke to him at his mother's trailer. We left there. We spoke to Zach Adams and his brother Dylan at their house on Adams Lane. And then at the end, I called Rebecca Earp, and I said, Miss Earp, you have given information to other people. I haven't talked to you yet. My name's Terry Dicus. I'm the case agent on this. I want you to think about this very carefully. I'm going to ask you a question, and if you lie to me, I'll make your life miserable. If you tell me the truth, I'm going to help you. And at that point, she said,
Object to the hearsay, Judge.
Okay, so after you talked with her, what determination did you make?
that I was wasting my time
Wasting your time doing what?
investigating these idiots.
Okay.
Sorry, no offense.
Not, these idiots, can you be more specific about these idiots?
Well, these idiots that keep on saying, I'm going to put her in the well. And
Right, but give names for the jury, please.
Jason Autry, Zach Adams, and Shane Austin, and Dylan Adams.
Okay. Did you have any special affinity for those four men?
No, I never met them before this case.
Okay. And so let's talk about some of the other people that you investigated regarding this case, some of the other suspects that you had. Will you tell the jury, please, about John Dodd and what evidence you had that he might be a suspect in this case?
John Dodd, he's a troublemaker, is the information we had. Now, I found him like a fairly likable young man, but he's a troublemaker. He'd done several things that I would classify as extremely mean and devious. He had actually tried to commit a theft at the Bobo house, and there were...
So he would have been familiar with the Bobo house?
Correct.
Okay.
And he also was seen in the area between 8:30 and 12, somewhere in there. There's several different witnesses that see him driving a four-wheeler, up on two wheels, the way they explained it, just going crazy, getting around the corner,
And what day is this?
on April 13th, 2011.
Okay. And so what other evidence did you have that pointed towards him? Did you use dogs in the situation?
We had dogs come down, and I love my dog, but I don't know how beneficial they are in law enforcement activities. But we had a dog that came out that alerted that the scent of Holly Bobo went towards his grandfather Grafton Dodd's house on, I can't think of the name of the road, but anyway, Grafton Dodd had a cabin north of the Bobos, probably 3 or 4 miles north of the Bobos, and these dogs supposedly alerted and said,
Excuse me, I assume Mr. Dicus was there. I mean, it sounds like
I was there.
you were there.
I did go there. Yep.
Okay. They
Yeah.
alerted.
They alerted, and I'm sorry. They told me that the scent is kind of weak, as if somebody had walked through here a couple of weeks or a week before this happened.
And in relation to when Holly Bobo had disappeared, how long were the dogs, how much later after she disappeared were the dogs doing their scent search?
It's hard to believe, but it was about a week or 2 weeks after that, you know.
Okay. And so that gave you reason, what did you do then with that information?
I interrogated Dodd. I went through his life, everything about him.
What kind of car did he have?
He had a white Ford Ranger, I believe.
Okay, a pickup truck.
Correct.
Okay. And
Yeah,
you-
we went through his truck too,
And
at
did
the
you?
t-
Oh,
go ahead.
go ahead.
at the time that I was interrogating him, we had an FBI team of 8 to 10 people sifting through his truck, doing everything with his truck. So
What about his phone records and his Facebook account?
we obtained both of those.
Okay. And did you make a determination about where he was living? You said his grandfather had a cabin over there. Did you decide where John Dodd was living at the time?
He had been staying with his grandfather.
Okay. Okay, let's move
But-
on. Oh,
You probably don't want me to ask that, but I was saying, but at the time of the kidnapping, he was supposedly staying with a friend of his, and he had an alibi.
but you had some people that had seen him that morning near the Bobo home.
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you then about a man named Keith White.
Keith White. Keith White hired James Barnes to build a deck, at his house. So, I mean, he was there at the time Barnes got there.
Okay. What about Larry Ham?
Larry Ham, interesting enough, his wife called and said, "Y'all need to look at my husband. He's good for this." So that was all we had. And sure enough, he was turkey hunting that morning. He kind of fits the physical description. He's close that our witnesses provided, somewhat anyway. That's all I remember.
And what had he been wearing that morning?
Camouflage. He'd been turkey hunting.
Okay. And did he have an alibi for the time? Did he have anybody else that could verify an alibi?
No, nobody could verify it. I believe his phone records may have provided the U.S. Marshal Service. They're the best with the phone, besides Mr. Frizzell. I'm sorry, Mr. Frizzell. But they are very good at working phone records because they do that all the time to chase down fugitives. They'll look at phone records and figure out where they're at. So I sent 2 marshals to go check him out, and they went through everything. And at the end, I mean, I wouldn't tell you 100% that he couldn't have done it, but he didn't fit a lot of other stuff that we knew that we're getting in. So
Okay. What about Richard Townsend?
we checked him out. Yes.
Why did you suspect him?
I'm kind of uncomfortable disclosing this because my boss said that we wouldn't. So I would really prefer if I.
Okay, I'll withdraw my question then.
Thank you.
How about James Barnes?
James Barnes.
Yes.
You know, me
Ed Barnes.
personally, at no point did I ever suspect James Barnes of doing anything wrong whatsoever. And I know that wasn't necessarily a consensus opinion, but that was my opinion because at 7:47, he's the one that's alerting everybody to, hey, this is happening. It's idiotic to think he was involved with it.
Right.
You know.
But did you direct an investigation towards him?
I did not me
The
personally.
TBI, did the TBI direct an investigation towards him?
Well, we checked him out very thoroughly.
Okay, so what did you check out about him?
His phone records were Keith White. We talked to him. We went to, I was part of this, we went to either Perry County or Wayne County to one of his friend's house and checked out that area. We searched a huge area. We talked to Mr. Keith Clark, who was his good buddy, and this is a guy who was supposedly with him at the time that they saw Holly and Natalie Bobo, Holly's cousin, walking, and they were supposedly staring at him. So we looked at him every way we could, including his mom, who he lived right beside, Miss Kathy Wise.
Okay. And what about the dogs? Did the dogs alert on anything regarding the Barnes house?
Yes.
What did the dogs alert to?
Well, not to his house. There was a pond beside it, and I believe the dogs alerted to the pond. You know, dogs came in from everywhere, and we didn't have certifications. We didn't know if they were great. You know, you're not going to turn them around. You're looking for somebody that's missing, and they want to go search. They want to go search the woods. Go ahead. They want to go search a pond. Go ahead. But I don't know how these dogs. Some of them absolutely had to be wrong, 100%. So,
Okay.
and in this case, Mr. Barnes, 100%, those dogs had to be, I don't know, looking for a chicken leg or something.
Okay. What about Kathy Wise, James Barnes' mother? Did you all investigate her?
Yes.
What did you do to investigate her?
Same type of thing. We did everything with everybody.
Okay, and was there a reason to be suspicious of her regarding a kidnapped victim?
To me, no. There were some people that were suspicious of that allegation.
Okay, what's the allegation?
Judge, I don't object to the relevance of this.
It's a reason that they investigated her, Your Honor. They got her phone records and thoroughly investigated her, and it's an allegation that came up.
You can ask.
I believe there was a girl, an underage girl, who may have been a Mennonite or something like that, and she, I wouldn't say kidnapping, she said, hey, you can stay with me, because there might have been allegations of abuse or something along that line, or neglect, and she told this girl, you can stay with me. So the girl stayed with her. It didn't result in any criminal charges. It might have been something that half of us would do, and the other half would say, I'm not going to get involved in it.
So she had harbored a runaway.
Correct.
Okay. What about, you mentioned Keith Clark. Can we go into Keith Clark?
Sure.
Who was Keith Clark?
Keith Clark was James Barnes' best friend.
Okay, and you started to say something about he had seen Holly and Natalie. Can you explain that a little more in depth?
Yes, I believe it was Natalie Bobo gave us information that Holly and her would go walking. They'd walked several times already that year up and down Swan Johnson. James Barnes lived close to them, and on at least one occasion they'd walked by, and Keith Clark and James Barnes had stared at them. They're fairly good-looking ladies, though.
Okay, and so what all did you do? What records or other items did you obtain to investigate Keith Clark?
Same thing. We did everything. We got everything we could possibly get on everybody that anybody came up with. This guy needs to be looked at. We got him.
What does that include? Phone records?
Phone records, interviewing them, checking out their alibi, doing everything we can to rule them in or rule them out.
Okay. What about Blake Barnett?
Blake Barnett was an ex-boyfriend of Holly's. I believe he was actually not the most current ex-boyfriend, but the ex-boyfriend before that. Mr. Barnett worked with Holly's boyfriend's dad, Boo Scott, and he worked at Food Giant in Parsons, and he was at work at 9:01 that morning.
Okay, so he was at work at 9:01, but not at the time that she actually disappeared from her home.
I mean, here's the way I when I got my bearings about me. She was kidnapped at 7:45. Her phone is moving at 8 o'clock. Her phone's that we can tell is disassembled between 9:25 and 9:40. So I'm looking for someone that cannot give a good excuse of where they're at from 7:45 to 9:40. That's all I care about, because if you're not where Holly's phone is, I don't care where you were at, what you were doing. That's what I'm looking at. So Blake Barnett could not have, in my opinion, been the one that kidnapped her. So that's how I ruled him out.
Okay. So just because of the 9 o'clock and he checked in at 9 o'clock, that was at, he clocked in to work, you said?
That's correct. And, you know, we talked to people that worked there as well, and asked how he was doing. What was his demeanor? How was he acting? You know, it'd be hard to imagine that someone could have done this and went on about their business and not shown a reaction whatsoever. So that was an important part of it.
What about Joseph Ragusa?
Very, very entertaining man. Tony the Tiger.
Why do you call him Tony the Tiger?
That was his nickname. This guy lived in the woods on somebody else's property. So when you go up to see him, you hear the dogs barking. He had like 15, 20 dogs, all strays. People had dumped off. Well, this man, he didn't have money to eat himself, but he had plenty of dog food. He fed every one of these dogs, took care of them, and on every tree close to where he was staying is a snake. He's killing snakes and eating them. So God bless him for that. That's why I say he's a very good man. He wore him out.
Okay.
And he had no vehicle. He didn't fit the physical description. His voice didn't sound like what we're looking for. So and he was at work that day. So anybody you name, I probably can give you 4 or 5 reasons why I know that person did not kidnap Holly.
What about John Rusum?
John Rusum, he,
What led you to him to begin with?
I don't remember. It may have been simply where he was living at the time, or someone may have called in. I don't remember. It was very weak information that we had.
Okay.
He was on probation, so when I went out there, people that are on probation, they don't have a right to deny you to go in their house. So we carried everybody and went through all his house. He had all kinds of camo, but I ruled him out because he's bald-headed. We had several people confirm that he's bald-headed. He showed me his foot, and it looked very, very bad. I don't know what the medical term is, but I believe it's had something to do with diabetes. And he had trouble walking. He only had access to a motorcycle. He didn't have a car. He
did have some transportation.
He had a motorcycle, yes.
Okay. And did he have an alibi for the time that she disappeared?
No, I don't believe he did. He applied for a job that morning, probably around 9 o'clock at the North 40 truck stop. I don't believe it was at the truck stop, but it's somewhere right around the truck stop. It may have been the auto body shop, or well, anyway, that was what he was doing that day. So,
were you able to clearly rule him out, or did he remain a partial suspect?
he didn't do it. I mean, yeah, I ruled him out. I mean, he didn't fit on anything, and that everybody you named, you said, well, what about this person as a suspect? I'm trying to put together a puzzle, and if I find 5 pieces that don't fit, I'm done. Or 2 pieces that don't fit, I'm done. It's not this person. You know, and everything you may disagree with me that wasn't enough, but all you really have to have is one fact that says this person couldn't have kidnapped her, and you need to go do something else. So I had several facts that said he didn't do it, so I moved on.
Okay, what about Michael Alexander?
Michael Alexander was at work that morning. He was working on a machine that he'd been working on for 2 years that was going to Australia. He worked for a company in Parsons named American Coding and Machine, something like that. It's right there on 641. But he was at work that morning, and he was confirmed by every one of his coworkers, and his boss. We had timesheets, every which way you can imagine. He was not there. He couldn't have done it.
Okay, what about Jason Nickel?
Okay, we looked at him early on, very early on, probably we'd already had the mobile command post, but we didn't get it that first day. I would say probably by the 15th or 16th, we were on Jason Nickel
15th or 16th?
of April.
Okay.
Yes, very
Now,
early.
his phone actually had some common pings with her phone that morning, did it not?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. And with him, at 9:30, he was at a doctor's office. This is what I remember. He was at a doctor's office in Benton County with kidney stones.
What were the reasons you suspected Jason Nickel to begin with?
I think if he's testified at this point, we can rule him out, so I don't see the relevance.
It is relevant.
He can say why he was looking at it.
He stalked a girl in Jackson. Officer Hedden with the Jackson Police Department got a warrant on him for that. He fit the description of an attempted abduction or stalking from a week to 2 weeks before in Dixon.
Okay, tell us about that attempted abduction in Dixon.
Relevant.
Well, but this man, are you aware
He's
of,
already testified he ruled him out. What happened in Dixon a week prior to this is irrelevant.
Well, there was a kidnapping 6 days before this one, an attempted kidnapping in Dixon, Tennessee, where a person pulled up in a car and tried to pull a woman who was similar in appearance.
It's irrelevant. He said he ruled this person out. This is your witness.
So when you ruled him out, it was only because of the doctor's appointment that morning. Is that right?
That's not the only way we ruled him out.
okay,
All right, so we did other things that are not admissible in court, but
okay,
that's not the only thing we did. No, I'm under oath. I can't tell you that's the only thing we did.
okay. What about Jerry Evans?
Jerry Evans, he lived really close to the Bobos, and actually, where he lived, I believe he probably would have seen the vehicle going by at the time of the kidnapping if he had been looking. The route of the kidnapper indicates that more than likely it went right in front of his house. Now, it's a pretty good ways off the road, but so Evans that morning saw a flatbed truck, a green flatbed truck, and he came to one of the roadblocks and tried to give some information about it. And they, I don't know, they didn't take that information, but I followed up on that at a later time. And you got to understand, I mean, while he's trying to give the information, Holly's cell phone is going all through the county. So, again, he's not the kidnapper according to just that. And Holly's cell phone went past his house. And it turns out the vehicle that he saw was used in cattle. They were feeding cattle. A Hispanic man drove it that morning for one of the cattle farmers.
Okay, and what about Clint Bobo? Was he a suspect at one time?
He was a suspect for probably 12 hours in my mind.
Okay, what about other people in the department? Did they think he was a suspect?
Yes.
Okay, and so what evidence kind of pointed towards him?
Are we talking about, Mr. Dicus is excluded as a suspect after 12 hours, so are we talking about other investigators?
Are you talking about his investigation?
Your investigation, what evidence did you initially think pointed towards him being the suspect?
Well, look, I'm not immune to the same type of things that other people were saying. Other people were thinking, how could he have done this? He did this, he didn't do this.
Well, what do you mean by he did this, he didn't do this?
Well, there's a lot of people that gave him grief. A lot of Captain Americans that said, well, if I'd been there, I'd done this. Yeah, you might have died right there in the carport. But a lot of people thought that was strange, that what he saw, it took him a few minutes. Literally, it's just a few minutes. It took him a few minutes to react to it and to figure out what was going on. So I think that was the main part of it, that people like, oh, why didn't he do something? He didn't know what was going on. And when I say I ruled him out, in my mind, when I found out for sure Holly's cell phone is gone, it's moving, when I found out for sure there's no body in or around the house anywhere, he didn't kidnap her, so I forgot about it. Forgot about him as a suspect.
Okay. And then what about Terry and Janet Britt? Did you investigate them?
I did.
Okay, and what were the reasons that you thought they would be involved, or Terry Britt would be involved?
Have a seat. It'll be a while. So, Terry Britt is a registered sex offender, a violent sex offender. He lives northern Decatur County. He has black hair. He weighs 200 pounds and he's 6 foot tall. So I got on to him because, number one, he is the exact size of what our witness said the abductor looked like. Okay? His history tells me he's capable of kidnapping her. So you put that together, and his alibi for that morning was kind of weak. His main alibi was his wife, which ordinarily that's not a bad alibi. That's what most people have. The wife is with you. That's it. But this wife had been with him on more than one occasion where he had picked up a woman and got accused of trying to sexually assault her or rape her. So that brought him as a suspect after Miss Karen put me on him. She called me one day and said, you got to find out about this guy Natalie calls Chester the molester. That's what she knows him by. That Natalie and Holly were in Dollar General store a couple of weeks before the kidnapping, and this guy was staring at him. So at the same time she calls, I believe it was the same day, I was dealing with a frantic girl that's saying, this guy has been stalking me and he won't stop. He won't stop stalking me.
And
The first time he stalked
Who
her,
is this?
Shelley King.
Okay.
No, Kristen Smith. I'm sorry.
Kristen Smith. Okay.
I believe it's Kristen Smith. Okay, but Your Honor, if we can we say initials on these girls? I don't want him to get out and do something.
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So this girl reported to me, this guy's stalking. So I meet her at the sheriff's department. I walk in, me and Ricky Emmon. First thing I notice about her, she's got blonde hair, blue eyes. She looked a lot like Holly. And she actually said that she had been pulled over by officers that thought she was Holly. And at first I kind of thought, they might be punking me or messing with me, because she looked similar. She looked very similar to her. She was not her first cousin, I believe her second cousin or third cousin. But anyway, she tells me about this guy on 3 separate occasions that has been following her, followed her home one time, and she followed through on it. She got a tag number. One of her friends had pulled up some information on the sex offender registry. She came and told me his name is Terry Britt. This is the guy that is stalking me. And she said, this is not, I've known this guy for years because I used to work at Joe's Video with Janet Britt. And at that point, I'm going crazy, but I got Miss Karen telling me, you better check out Chester the Molester. Well, at the same time, I go talk to Natalie, and Natalie tells me Chester the Molester is Terry Britt. So I got Terry Britt seeing Holly shortly before the abduction, and he's stalking somebody that could pass as her sister the weekend after the abduction. I got a little curious.
Okay, so what did you do next, just in terms of the stalking victim?
In terms of the stalking,
Well, just stalking victims.
okay. We kept getting more information about all these girls in Decatur County that he had been stalking around the time of the kidnapping, and of course, this is what I'm looking for. Somebody that I don't believe that somebody accidentally got in the woods that morning. Thank God, Miss Karen's gone to work, Dana's gone to work, and Clint's vehicle's parked somewhere else. I don't believe that. I believe they had to look into it. They had to put a little bit of effort into kidnapping her, a little bit of thought into it. They thought about where they were going to park the vehicle. They thought about where they were going to take her to. I don't believe this was a random type thing where, hey, I'm checking the water meter, and then, well, let's commit a Class A felony. So a total of 8 different women has told us different things, and some of them are a little dated a few years back, but all the information is kind of similar. He would pull up, he got caught, stopped in a road, staring at these girls. Another lady said she caught him staring, and her husband worked as a deputy sheriff. So, I mean, you think about how brazen someone had to be to stalk a deputy sheriff's wife, right? Just about as brazen as you had to be to go and kidnap somebody off their carport. So that deputy sheriff went and talked to him at the time that happened, said, you ain't going to do it. You're not going to do it. And that's
objectively sort of hearsay, and we're getting a lot of Mr. Dicus' opinions about things, which I don't believe is the purpose of this testimony. Your Honor actually already ruled on that.
But it's to show why his investigation moved in a certain direction.
I'm given great latitude to show everyone that he's checked out and excluded. Let's
Okay,
pick this up a little.
so you had 8 women that you were able to determine had been stalked. Was there a type that these women looked like?
most of them were blonde-headed and blue-eyed. The majority of them were very good-looking women.
So
Very
then, what did you do to check out Mr. Britt, Terry Britt?
The first thing I did was check prior reports on what had we done to exclude him or get him off, be off his trail. So that's the first thing I did. I went back and read everything else, and I checked what his alibi was. His alibi was he got up that morning. Well, first of all, he delivered newspapers with his wife on Tuesday nights. So they delivered newspapers until 3:10 a.m. on the morning of the kidnapping. But allegedly, they got up that morning for a bathtub that had been leaking for several weeks, and they decided they were going to go get a bathtub that morning. And she laid out of work. She didn't go to work that day. At a newspaper, in Decatur County the day Holly was kidnapped. So,
And what was the significance of that to you?
well, there's normally 4 or 5 people that work at this newspaper, but on Wednesdays they only have Jan and another guy. So when she laid out of work that day, she left one guy who told me himself he was a low-functioning alcoholic as being in charge of the newspaper on the biggest news day in the history of the state of Tennessee. So I thought that was significant. So I went back over.
Was it a scheduled day off that she took?
No, she didn't tell anybody. She just laid out. That's what we had heard. I found out later that she didn't lay out. She went to work, and he called her and made her leave work.
Okay. So go ahead. What else about their alibi?
So their alibi, they got up that morning, went and got a bathtub. There's several different parts of that I checked out, but the first thing I wanted to know is, was there any type of discrepancy? Because since he's on the sex offender registry, a good buddy of mine, a brilliant idea, at the very beginning, he gave orders to some of the Decatur County investigators or sheriff's deputies, said, go out and find every sexual offender in this county, find out where they're at and where they've been. That was brilliant. That worked great. But when they went out, they came back and told us, and I think when they were checking on these sex offenders, they didn't really keep up with their time that much. So they said,
And Your Honor, is this an opinion? He said, I think.
Well, if he knows,
Speculation.
If he knows.
do you know?
yeah, I'm just trying to say that I don't blame them for being wrong. Okay?
Okay.
So, but they were wrong. They were off on what time they went out. So they go out there, and around 1:45, two deputies go out looking for Terry Britt. And at the time they go out, there's at least 3 vehicles missing from the house.
And is Mr. Dicus there for this?
It's in the report. It's in the report.
All right, Mr. Dicus isn't here for this. So, we've objected continuously on something.
He's testifying someone else observed 3 vehicles were missing.
Yes, but it's part of his investigation, Your Honor.
It's still hearsay.
Okay, we'll skip that portion for now.
Okay. So, the Britts were not home at 1:45, okay? And they were gone somewhere at that time. They go back, the deputies go back later on that day, 3 to 3:30, and they see the Britts unloading.
And again, we're getting into, I know we've heard testimony about this, but this is not his
Okay.
observations.
Hearsay.
We heard testimony about this. You can skip
Okay.
that part too.
All right, well, I mean,
Okay.
I checked his alibi and found out it was garbage.
Okay. So what else about the alibi was garbage? Why did you think the alibi was garbage?
We pulled his phone. We pulled Jan's phone records. Britt had always said, "I don't have a phone. I don't have a phone at all." He told that to the Well, okay. He had told that repeatedly. And when we checked out her phones, well, actually, Danny Haynes told me that.
And who was Danny?
That's bad. Okay.
It gets tricky, but who is Danny Haynes?
Danny Haynes is Jan's boss.
And did you interview him during your investigation?
Yes.
Okay. So after talking to Danny Haynes, what then were you looking for in the telephone records?
Well, from what Danny Haynes told.
Not from what he said,
Okay.
but what were you looking for in the telephone records when you get the telephone records?
I'm looking to see if Jan and Terry talked to each other at all that day.
Were you looking for a specific time?
Yes, any time that day, because their stories, they're together all day.
Okay, but how did you figure out what his telephone number was if he said he didn't have a cell phone?
We didn't know his cell phone for sure until we got up on a wiretap.
Well, but before that, you knew you had already tapped a telephone that you thought belonged to him. So by looking at Janet Britt's telephone records, what was it that clued you into what might be Terry Britt's telephone number?
It was the only number that called. It was the only number it called, and if he's calling every day at lunchtime, then there should be a record of that, and if he's making a phone call from the parking lot, then he's probably got a cell phone.
Okay. So based on that, you now have a telephone number that you think is Terry Britt's cell phone number. What do you do with that?
I got geolocate information. In other words, the same as I did with Holly's phone. Find out where it was that entire day.
Okay. And I think their alibi was that they were together the entire day. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so knowing that that was their alibi, by looking at the phone records, what were you able to determine?
That their alibi was a lie.
Why?
Because 12/17, Britt calls.
Well, first of all, what kind of activity was on Mr. Britt's phone that morning?
I think we're getting into sort of some like cell phone expertise, and I think it's demonstrated.
Same calls or texts. We're not getting into technical.
Right, no technical, but what kind
Sure.
of telephone calls were you able to?
Well, I think it's easily illustrated by what he just said, John. He said Britt called as if he can testify as to who has a telephone in their hand.
He can say from the telephone records.
From the telephone records, what were you able to determine?
The first call that
What records were that morning? First of all, what did the records show?
there was no incoming, outgoing calls that morning.
Okay.
So
When is the first call then?
12/17.
Okay, and what happens at that time?
Britt's cell phone communicates with an ex-wife, and Britt's story is that that's the first time he found out about the abduction of Holly Bobo.
Okay, and then what did you determine next regarding his alibi that he was with his wife all day long, Janet Britt?
His cell phone called Janet's cell phone and talked to it for 2 minutes and 56 seconds.
Okay, and so why did you suspect that? I mean, why did you find that significant?
Well, it's obvious that it's not true. So
What's not true?
his alibi is not true. It's fabricated.
Okay, so what else did you do to investigate his alibi from that day? Did Janet Britt, did they present you with any kind of physical documentation?
Janet Britt did not. At one point, one of our TBI agents and an FBI agent went out and spoke to Britt, and they attempted to. Britt contacted his wife, who came to the scene, and
Where were they at the time?
Janet was at work, and Terry Britt was at his house at 3138 Jeanette Holiday Road.
Okay,
So he's talking to him, and Britt says, "Hold on, let me call and get the receipt here." And they're like, but he calls, and she comes up there, shows him the receipt for a bathtub, which is what they supposedly bought that day.
and where was the receipt from?
It was from All Goods Salvage. It's a place in Benton County, just north of Decatur County.
Okay, and did you personally do anything then to try to check out that alibi at All Good Salvage?
Yes, I went and spoke to every employee from All Goods that was working that day. None of them could really remember Terry Britt.
Okay, were you able to find anybody that could verify that he'd been in the store that day?
No, they had no surveillance video. They had no receipt that matched the receipt that they had showed.
Now explain that about no receipt that matched. What does that mean?
So they have these old-timey receipts, got a stack of them sitting on the desk.
Where does the stack sit?
They sit right on the desk by the cash register up front.
Okay.
So they have these stack of receipts, and whenever they make a sale, they'll pull off one of these receipts and write it up as what they've purchased. They'll undo it, give the customer one copy, and then they'll retain a copy, a carbon copy.
Okay. And so what did you ask All Good Salvage to do for you?
I asked the accountant for All Goods. They had already turned in the receipt to the accountant, and I asked them to pull the receipts and find out if there was a purchase of a bathtub on April 13, 2011, or any time that week. So they pulled up the whole week, and there's no receipt to it.
So the carbon copy of the receipt that Terry Britt showed you, that was his alibi for where he had been that day, it was missing from the store's copies.
That's correct.
Okay. And did he present you with any other receipts from that day?
No, well, let me correct you a little bit there. He didn't present me with any receipts.
Okay.
We got his receipts out of his safe when I did a search warrant in January of 2012. So he didn't actually give me the receipts. I took them.
Did they have a lot of receipts in the safe or just a few?
There were several receipts. I don't.
But were they from different days or just that day?
He had receipts from different days. There wasn't a whole lot of receipts, but there were a few in there.
Okay. And he had other receipts from that day also, didn't he?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what those other receipts were?
Yes, he had and this is another part of his alibi that's fabricated. His story is, they got up, they went to All Good Salvage, they looked for bathtubs. They were worried about the price, so they decided to go to Buck's Building Supply in Parsons, and check them out there. So they go to Parsons, they check out the bathtubs there.
Now, was it Parsons Building Supply or Decaturville?
Decaturville Building Supply, that's right. So they check them out there, then they go back to All Goods and purchase a bathtub. So they went to Camden twice that day. That's it. This other receipt was from an All Good, a discount bin, All Good discount bargain bin or something like that, where on that day, on April 13th, they had purchased some vinyl remnants. So that would have put it at 3 times of going to Benton County. So that was, when I interviewed Britt, that was something he just stared like, you got me. He had no answer for this. Because I said, was that possible? Did you go up there 3 times? Have you been lying all this time? No. Well, maybe you had the vinyl remnant in there with a bathtub. No, there's no way it would have fit. It's like, okay, thank you.
So he denied going to All Goods All Goods discount on the 13th of April.
That's correct.
Although he had a receipt that showed he was at All Goods discount that day.
That's correct. And he was in Benton County that afternoon around 2:30 or so, buying gas at a gas station in Benton County.
So say that again, please.
He was we have a receipt from a credit card or debit card where he was in Benton County around 2:30. His cell phone shows that it was up there later on that afternoon on the day of the 13th.
Okay. Okay, so at that point, what did you do next?
At that point, let's see. I've already interviewed Jan's boss. I've already interviewed the person that had supposedly seen them that day on that Wednesday when they came in. The guy that was working there that they left there. At that point, I began drafting a wiretap application to wiretap the home and the cars, the cell phones of the Britts. And I also drafted a search warrant application.
And before we get into that, what about the voice? Because I heard you say something earlier about he had a voice that matched. What did you do to try to identify his voice?
Okay, well that's in January. Okay. So we did the search warrant. We did we installed all the wiretap devices January 17th of 2012. Part of a wiretap, what you do is you monitor conversations, and then you need to stimulate it. You need to do something that gets them talking about what you want them to talk about. So part of that stimulation, January 25th or so, I asked to interview Britt. So I went through, at that point, recorded his voice and, went through the whole story with him that day. He had, at an attorney's office, he'd hired an attorney, so we were there. And then after that, I let Clint listen to some audio recordings that had his voice in it.
Okay. And did Clint identify anybody when he listened to audio recordings?
Yeah, Clint had trouble distinguishing between Alan Snelling. If anybody knows him, he's got a deep voice. Alan
And
Snelling.
who is Alan Snelling?
He's a sergeant with the Savannah Police Department.
And was there any way he was a possible suspect in the disappearance of Holly Bobo?
No, he was at work that day, and he's about 5'8", 150, 60 pounds.
Okay.
So, and real short hair. So I let Clint listen to him, and he asked, "Is that the same voice, 2 and 5?" And 5 was Britt, 2 was Alan Snelling. And I said, "No, I can't answer that. I just want you to tell me if you recognize the voice from that morning." And he says, "Well, they sound very similar. I can't distinguish them, but it's the same tone and the same pitch as what I heard that morning." Both voices. And at that point, the first time I let Clint listen to it, he kind of leaned more heavily on Alan Snelling than he did Britt. Well, I came back after I let him listen to this, because I recorded Britt saying, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be," was basically the Miranda warnings. And then I went around to several police officers here in Savannah and said, "Read this for me. I need to have a voice identification," So that's what I did. Well, the second time I went there, I recorded a much longer story. So I had Alan Snelling basically repeat 10 or 11 minutes of the story that Terry Britt told.
This is a very long story to him to tell the story about how Clint Bobo couldn't identify anybody.
Can we shorten this up?
Okay, so the second time you did an extended voice.
And test.
Correct.
Right. What was the result of the second test?
Okay. Before the second test, I let him listen to the original recording again, and he leaned. He was fairly certain that it was Britt, the voice he heard. He listened to the entire thing, and he says, "Yes, I'm not absolutely certain, but I believe that's the voice I heard."
And did he give you a percentage of certainty?
I believe he said it was 80%. He was 80% sure, not absolutely certain, but
Okay. So then, in order to get the wiretap, now the wiretap was signed by the court, is that right?
correct.
Okay. And in order to get the wiretap, you put down multiple reasons why you had probable cause to believe that Terry Britt was involved in the disappearance of Holly Bobo.
I reject the hearsay, Judge. Talking about reasons in a wiretap application.
Just made an affidavit.
You did. There was an affidavit that was prepared, wasn't there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the standard to get a wiretap is probable cause, isn't it?
Probable cause on steroids is what we say.
Because to get a wiretap, you actually have to you have to show that other efforts were exhausted.
That's correct.
Okay.
Or either exhausted or would be unfruitful.
Okay. So you filled out, or you did the affidavit and the application. What was the result of the wiretap?
The result of the wiretap is I found out that Janet Britt was not involved in the kidnapping of Holly Bobo.
Okay. When you did the wiretap, was there something that occurred on the wiretap that made you believe that Terry Britt suspected you might be listening to him?
Yes, he mentioned in the wiretap at the very beginning, watch what you say. I bet they bugged the house or bugged the area. And if I can explain that a little further,
Yes.
is it okay?
He testified to what he heard Mr. Britt say in the wiretap, and that's not objectionable and perfectly fine. But as far as getting into opinion testimony, again, this is what the
Okay.
already addressed.
Well, I would simply explain how, I was going to explain how he knew that, but that's all. Huh?
Said we're not going into any technical aspects or opinion.
Okay. Okay, with the Am Farm video, were you able to do anything with the Am Farm video that you matched up pictures that you thought were indicative of Mr. Britt's activities on the day that Holly Bobo disappeared?
Yes.
What was that?
So Britt calls his ex-wife at 12:17. He called his wife at 12:20 or 12:21. So I looked at the Am Farm video to see if he's coming down south on 641 going towards where she works. And I found a champagne-colored F-150 extended cab coming down Am Farm video right about the time, and I drove this several times, right about the drive time it would have taken to go from his house down to where that video is, or where the camera is.
Okay. Did you have a reason to believe that Terry Britt had changed his appearance after it came out that there was a witness to Holly Bobo's disappearance?
Yes.
What was that?
So I pulled all of Britt's photos from 34 years going back, and he's always had
What do you mean his photos?
his photographs. Every time when you're in prison, they take photographs of you, intake and outtake, and I think they must take them some other times, but you know, we have a photograph of him with long hair, shoulder length hair, through all these times. Around the time of the kidnapping, according to several, 3 different people, he changed his appearance by cutting his hair off short. I don't know if it was before the kidnapping or after the kidnapping, but it was around that time.
Okay, and so also, where is Mr. Britt's residence located in relationship to where some of the evidence in this case was discarded?
It's basically at the geographic center of it. Northeast of Holly's house, probably 5 to 8 miles northeast of Holly's house.
Okay. And also, did you have reason to believe, or what did your investigation tell you about Mr. Britt's knowledge of the area where the items had been thrown out, where Holly's items had been thrown out along the road?
So the Yellow Springs Road, where the first item was thrown out, there used to be a trailer there. It was a friend of Britt's. They would go there quite frequently. So right in front of this trailer is where Holly's first receipt was thrown out.
Okay, and what about Mr. Britt being familiar with County Corner Road and the area of the cellular tower where her body was found?
Yeah, so Britt used to put $20 in gas in the car and drive around and drink all day, and that is one of the areas where they would go to quite frequently. There's no cops there. You never see a car there. We'd go. We would monitor the traffic, and we'd see 1 or 2 cars for an hour, and that was it.
Okay, and did you check in with Mr. Britt's cohorts?
I did.
Okay, and after you did that, what kind of information did you learn from checking with them? It's not,
He can say what he did in response to it.
What did you do in response to the information that you
learned from checking with his companions.
Are you referring to Skip and
Sure.
Mr. Hosteller? I don't know. We just kept trying to gather more information. I did conduct a specific search at New Prospect Cemetery, which is right up there on the route of where her cell phone traveled.
Okay, and Okay, at some point, did you confront Terry Britt about stalking these women?
I did.
And what was the result after you confronted him with that?
That was a huge mistake because he threatened two of the women that he had been stalking after I confronted him with all the information that I had that he was stalking other women. I didn't tell him any names or where they worked or anything, but unfortunately he knew he had been stalking, so he followed one of them home, stopped in the middle of the road and stared at her. The other one, we got surveillance video that she worked at the Radio Shack right beside an Ace Hardware. They were connected, owned by the same people, had the same door. So he's in Ace Hardware staring at her. He goes and buys something for 60 cents, then goes back, stares at her again. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. I should have never said that.
Okay, at some point then, did you get a search warrant to search his home?
I did. That was actually before I confronted him. We did the
Okay.
search warrant before we ever confronted him.
Okay, and so what did you find when you searched his home?
Well, all kinds of stuff. I mean, we found videos on his computers. We found
So let's talk about the videos on his computer. Okay, what kind of videos did you find on his computers?
And there's one thing, I don't believe Mr. Dicus is the agent who extracted any sort of videos from Mr. Computer.
Then he won't be giving testimony.
Well, but Your Honor, it was all part of the case file, and he reviewed
Doesn't make any
these.
difference. If it's hearsay, it's still hearsay.
Okay. It's coming from it's not hearsay, it's coming from Mr. Britt's computer.
It's what someone told him was in the computer.
Okay. I'd like to pass these images up and have you just identify them as images that you recognize as having come from Mr. Britt's computer.
And again, he's going to be relying on information he got from somebody else.
Well, I
He
want
can
him to
ask-
identify this.
He can be asked if he recovered these.
Okay.
If someone else recovered, then it's not competent testimony.
Did you, well, did you review a report that was made after the extraction?
I think you directed her exactly what the question should be, and she didn't ask it. Did you recover this?
Did you recover these?
Did you
If
recover-
he didn't, then it's not competent.
Well, I can't pass him the images yet.
He knows whether or not he recovered any images, Your Honor. He didn't.
Did you recover any images off of the computer?
Did I?
Yes.
No.
Was there a search done of his computer at the same time you searched his house?
Yes.
Where this computer was seized?
Correct.
Okay.
Several computers were seized.
And then they were sent to the lab, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And after that came back, did you ever discuss that material with Terry Britt?
I did.
Okay. And did he deny that any of that belonged to him, or did he acknowledge it?
He couldn't stop looking at it.
He what?
He could not stop looking at it,
Okay.
but he did not deny it.
Okay. So anyway, you said you found videos on his computer. What else did you find at his house?
We recovered probably 100 items altogether. We found, we had more dogs there. These dogs were human decomposition dogs. We recovered a shovel, a couple of hammers, and an axe that had been out in one of his storage sheds, and the dogs alerted to them as being around the scent of human decomposition, and 2 of his vehicles alerted to that as well. And we got the receipts.
So now,
We got cell phones. I mean,
okay, I'd like to pass forward to you the photograph. Now, do you recognize that photograph?
yes, ma'am. These are the antique.
Antique?
Correct. Well, that's antique. Yeah,
So,
antique items at the Britts.
and I'd like to have this been marked as an exhibit.
The exhibit, 220.
Okay. Now, I'd like to show this to you. Can you please describe?
Oh, you're gonna have to uncap it,
Will you please describe for the jury what these items are? I'm going to zoom in so you can see some of them a little better. What are these items?
This is a hammer.
Yes?
Okay. This is a axe. This is a shovel.
A shovel.
And this is a, you have to forgive me, I'm not exactly a manly man, but I believe that would be considered a hammer too.
Okay. And why was it that you were referring to these things as being antiques?
Because after we took them, I was constantly requested to get them back to them because they were antiques. They've been in the family forever.
Did they appear to you to be antiques?
Again, I don't know what an antique shovel looks like. I'm sorry.
Okay. But who was requesting to get it back?
Janet Britt.
And did you ever return it to her?
I don't remember.
And I wanted to ask you also, in the description that you got of the person that possibly took, or the description of the person that walked away with Holly Bobo, was the person compared to anybody else? Do you remember there being a comparison
Yes.
from Clint Bobo?
Yeah, Clint said that the guy was built just like his cousin Richie Pratt. So we carried, and Holly and Miss Karen were the same height, so we carried Miss Karen and Richie Pratt basically the same area that Clint saw. We tried to measure the height, so Clint's saying the guy's a little bit shorter than Richie Pratt, so we got, we did some surveillance on Terry Britt. We took some pictures of him as he's walking in and out at the newsletter. And we also had Mr. Richie Pratt walk through at the same area, and we took pictures of them to compare side by side.
Okay. And I've just passed you two pictures. What do you recognize these two pictures as being?
Okay, this is one picture of Terry Britt, one picture of Richie Pratt taken in the back parking lot of the newsletter.
Okay. And will you hand me the picture of Richie Pratt first?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to have this marked as an exhibit.
221,
And then my next exhibit of Terry Britt.
222.
First, I'm going to put up this picture here. Now, who is this a picture of?
That is Mr. Richie Pratt. He is a cousin of the Bobos.
Okay. Now, who is this a picture of?
That is Mr. Terry Lee Britt.
Okay. And just for the record, Terry Britt is the one that has on the shorts in the picture. Is that right?
That's correct.
Was that another factor that you looked at when you were considering that Mr. Britt might be involved in this?
Yes.
Hey, did you recover any Xerox copies, just to kind of speed things along, did you recover any Xerox copies at the Britt's home that you found suspicious or odd?
Not that I
How about
remember.
from a yearbook?
From, oh, yeah, okay. That, one of the lady that I told you that worked at Radio Shack, they had a locked shed in the back, and
Who's they?
Jan and Terry had a locked shed behind their house, and in this shed, in a carpenter's binder, you know, the one they flip up, in that, they had a picture of this girl highlighted, Nicole, N.A.
Okay, and so this picture that they had of her, where did it come from?
It came from the newsletter where Jan worked.
And why would her picture have been in the newsletter?
I believe she had gotten a scholarship or graduated from high school, something like that.
Okay. Did you ever come across a reason why Holly's photograph would have been in the newsletter?
Yes, when she graduated, she was in there too. Got a $500 scholarship for something.
And
maybe
this
some-
person, this NA that you said her photograph from her yearbook was Xeroxed, is that the same way that it appeared in the newsletter, her yearbook photograph?
I believe so.
Okay. And so, do you remember what school she went to in relationship to Holly?
I think she went to Riverside, the same school. Or it might have been Scotts Hill.
Okay.
It's one of the two.
Okay,
There's only two, so it might have been Scotts Hill.
okay. very
I
good.
know the other lady that I was talking to you about, she went to the other school. She went to Riverside, the lady that he followed home.
And the pink underwear that was found kind of near Shane Austin's trailer, did you have a working theory on why that pink underwear was found outside his trailer?
No Jackson's sort of opinion or theory, Judge.
The questions, all right, Joe.
Did you have a working theory as to why that underwear was found there?
My theory, after we figured out that it wasn't Holly's, was that someone was cleaning out their car, and there was another pair of another woman's underwear in there, and they grabbed them and threw them out, just going down the road. That was my theory.
And was it related at all to the materials that belonged to Holly?
No.
When you said cleaning out their car, that means just a litter bug threw them there?
Yeah, well, so the route that Holly's cell phone probably traveled, as best we can tell, is certainly when you do the drive times and you do the cell pings and all this, the route that she traveled at around 9 o'clock, she's going down Yellow Spring, the abductor is going down Yellow Springs Road, 902, 905. He's going down that time. So at that point, my theory is he's throwing stuff out, getting ready to go back home. Or go
What stuff out?
He's throwing out her
And who's her?
okay. The abductor is throwing out Holly's receipts. He's throwing out the panties that just happened to be in the vehicle because they dealt with another girl. He continues on the route till he gets to the creek on Gooch Road, where he throws out the majority of the stuff that he doesn't plan on keeping. He throws out her lunchbox. He throws out her
Notebook, does he throw
notebooks,
out?
her notebooks, her book. You know, throws out all this stuff. And you know, my working theory is at that time, you know, Holly was dead.
Okay, and so why is it that you thought that by the time the abductor threw out the lunchbox, Holly would have been dead?
Jackson's opinion, I think we spent way too much time talking about theories and opinions.
No. Objection sustained. Anybody in the world can have a theory or speculate.
I know, but he's the lead agent on the case, Your Honor, directing the investigation, and his
But not,
Okay, about the palm print that was found on the Mustang, did you all test Terry Britt's palm print?
I don't remember that. I thought we did. Maybe we didn't.
He was not excluded, was he?
That's right. He was not excluded but he wasn't. They didn't say it was his, but they said they couldn't say that it might have been.
Also, did you find any connection between Zach Adams and Clint Bobo
No,
in your investigation?
none.
Did you find any evidence at all that led you to believe that Zach Adams and Clint Bobo had been meth buddies?
That's ridiculous. No.
Why would that be ridiculous?
Object to his opinion and his theories again,
What
Go ahead,
evidence?
Nancy.
We talked to everybody that Clint Bobo knows, everybody that Holly Bobo knows, Miss Karen, Dana, everybody. And the information we had on drug use from the Bobos was simply that Clint had smoked marijuana 3 times in his life, the last time in 2008.
I think we're getting far astray.
Okay.
Okay, so there was no evidence, though, that he had been involved in drugs.
Not one person told us that.
And did you know what his current job was in the spring of 2011?
He worked for a nursing home company that had several different nursing homes, and he was a counselor. So he would go in and work at one nursing home one day and then go to a different one on a different day.
And so do you know whether or not he was drug tested in relation to that job?
I don't.
Okay. What about Natalie Bobo and Zach Adams? Did you find any connection between those two in your investigation?
I believe there was a connection between Natalie. I believe there was a connection between Natalie and Zach, or we had information there was.
Okay.
That at one point in time they'd had a relationship.
But when you investigated that, did it lead to anything? Did you ever uncover any evidence that there was, in fact, a relationship?
I don't.
He said yes. He just said yes to that question.
Well, I think he said that he got tips, right?
He didn't say that.
He said,
They had information.
okay, did you check out that information and did it turn out to be accurate?
Well, the only way we can check that out is by looking at their cell phone and see if they talk. Okay, asking them, hey, have you had something to do with him?
And did you find any records on their cell phone that they had been talking with one another?
Not that I recall.
Okay. And a matter of fact, did you investigate Natalie Bobo with regard to the disappearance?
No.
Well, did you do a preliminary investigation of her?
We interviewed her. We checked out, other people that.
So she was ruled out as a suspect.
We have a witness that said it was a man. What do you want me to tell you? I mean, she
Okay,
was ruled out as a suspect, yes.
Okay. just
In
wanted to
reality,
confirm.
she was ruled out as a suspect.
Okay, very good. If I can have a minute, Your Honor. And are you familiar with people that are chronic meth users? You've come into contact with them, haven't you?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, and people that are chronic meth users, have you ever heard the term meth bugs? What is meth bugs?
So it's actually not bugs. It's a phenomenon. There's a chemical in meth that makes people parts of their body dehydrate. So when they dehydrate, it looks like first it looks kind of like a pimple, but
Like a what?
a pimple, a
Okay.
zit, and then it feels like it itches. It feels like something's crawling in you. It's my education and information. I've never experienced this, but it feels like a mites. They call it mites. So they scratch it. They scratch that area where they're itching, and you know it's usually on their face. If y'all have ever seen the before and after pictures of meth heads, yeah, that's a lot of what you see on their face is this thing called formication, and it's basically a dehydrating of an area of their body,
Okay.
which causes it to itch.
And people that are on meth, do they tend to pick at their scabs and things?
Yes,
And why is that?
because their skin feels like it's crawling. It just feels like it's crawling, and there's actually some people that will pick at it and eat the scab because that chemical is in the scab.
What
that-
chemical?
I don't know the chemical, but it's one of the it's whatever gets you high from the meth. So it's there right there at that sore. They pick it and eat it, and they get a little bit of a high out of it.
So you're saying it's almost like there's a little meth in the scab that they eat and get high from?
Well, I would, not all of them, but there are people that do that. Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to pass up some photographs to you. You testified that you had pulled.
These are old booking photographs of Terry Britt from the 80s and the 90s. Just like you tried before with an old booking photo of Jason Archer. They have absolutely no relevance at all.
He specifically said that he pulled old photos from 30 years. I want to pass
Concerning
these.
the change in appearance.
Yes.
Are we getting closer to concluding?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
So I'd like to pass the, and there's one more.
Yeah, this is kind of a report.
I'd like to pass these photographs up to you. See if these are in fact the booking photographs that you were talking about, that you reviewed regarding change in his appearance. Just one more.
I'm sorry,
The last one isn't even, it's a small picture on a booking report.
it's not a booking
Talking
photo.
about something from 10 years ago, or 15 years ago.
And I'm going to pass a tiny little picture that I've torn off of the report. Are these the pictures that you reviewed to see that he had had a change in appearance?
Yes, ma'am.
So I understand the question. Change in appearance from the 80s? That's what you were looking at?
That's all right. Collective Exhibit 223, move on.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, let's take a recess. Follow the admonitions I gave you at the outset. We'll take 15 minutes. Ms. Thompson, you passed the witness, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
So you've been up there for a while. Okay?
Yes, sir.
We're going to start where you started with your testimony, okay?
Okay.
Shane's trailer. 2 or 3 days after she was taken. That's where you started, right?
Yes, sir. That was where we started. Correct.
Shane's trailer, that was about 75 yards from papers of hollies that had been found on Yellow Springs.
Wait a second. XC's over. Give me some more too.
Yes, sir. Is that correct?
I don't know the distance, but I would. It's about right. That's pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yes, sir.
So you did what you should. You sent agents there to talk to them and see what they could see. correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you aware that they found drugs and a kit to inject drugs hidden up in the tall area of the house, of the trailer?
I don't remember that per se. Very well could have been.
Were you aware that they found all sorts of holes and stuff that had been dug in the backyard behind the house for hiding places and stuff?
Yes, sir. I remember that.
Were you aware that they saw a burn barrel that they looked at?
I don't recall that. Maybe, perhaps. Again, it's tough to tell you what somebody else saw.
Were you aware that they saw a vehicle?
His S10 pickup, yes, in the back.
S10 pickup.
Correct.
And you were aware that they found a sock that had some sort of biological material,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
And I took from your testimony that Shane said he'd been masturbating into the sock. Is that right?
Well, that's what.
Your Honor, I think that's the hearsay if he doesn't know what Shane Austin said.
Sister, this is precisely what we objected to earlier.
I took from your testimony that whatever Shane Austin said, the agents and you accepted it.
I believe that would be accurate. Yes, sir.
And so it wasn't collected.
No, it was. I don't believe it was collected. No, sir.
So you didn't test it.
No, sir.
Instead, you took Shane Austin's word for it.
Well, and among other things.
Is it smart to take the word of somebody who's living in a trailer with drugs hidden, with hiding holes, about 75 yards from where her property was taken?
It would not be if we didn't have a witness that could describe the abductor. So,
And we'll get there eventually. But right then, don't you think we should have gotten that? Looking back in retrospect.
in retrospect, I can say that the officers that went there are the best in the world, and they did what they thought they needed to do at that time. And I'm not going to look back and say they should have done this or that.
Okay.
They
So
did what they should have done.
It wasn't collected and it wasn't tested, correct?
I believe that's correct.
And every time thereafter, when the officers went to Mr. Austin's trailer, that sock was nowhere to be found. Correct?
Objection if he knows, Your Honor.
It's the case officer back there, Judge.
Go ahead.
Well, hopefully he cleaned it. I don't know.
You don't know what he did with it.
Yeah, it wasn't there the one time I went to Shane Austin's trailer.
It wasn't around to be collected and tested anymore. Correct?
I didn't see it.
Correct. From Shane Austin's trailer, we then began talking about a litany of names. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I heard numerous names. I heard James Barnes. I heard Keith Clark. I heard Jason Mill. I heard Jonathan Dye. I heard Jerry Evans. I heard name after name after name. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And you looked into those people.
Yes,
Correct?
sir. I did.
And time again, they were excluded, 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 excluded.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir. To the best we could at any particular time.
But yet, for some reason, we talked about them today.
Correct.
But there was nothing there.
Correct.
And then we jumped to Mr. Adams, to Mr. Austin, to Mr. Dylan Adams, and to Mr. Jason Alter. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Names that had come up, correct?
Yes, sir.
Early on.
That's right.
Names that had kept on coming up in the investigation.
Yes, sir.
And if I understood you right, you went to these people to try to establish their whereabouts that day, correct?
That's correct. I went back and doubled up on what everybody else had done and told me That starting around July, the first time I met him.
Because that's important.
Yes, sir.
These guys whose names keep coming up, one of them who lives right next to her property has been found in that suspicious trailer with all that stuff. We need to establish where these people were that day, correct?
We need to establish where they were from 7:45 to 9:40 a.m.
In your minds, 7:45, the time she was abducted,
Yes, sir.
to the time that you think the phone was discarded?
The phone was disconnected. It wasn't discarded until later on that day.
Okay, so until the time the phone stops.
Correct. Till the battery was taken out.
Time she's taken that follows the cell phone pings,
Correct.
till the time that's over.
Yes, sir.
And their whereabouts that day, they said they were with each other, except for Jason Autry, right?
Yes, sir.
So your three of your suspects, whose names kept on coming up, said they were all with each other,
Yes, sir.
right?
Correct.
You opined about somebody else's alibi before. You said it was like garbage.
Yes, sir.
You have three suspects whose names keep on coming up, and they're trying to alibi each other. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Except Mr. Autry, right?
Right. He got up with him later on that day, I believe.
Mr. Autry tells you he gets with them later, correct?
Yes.
But at the critical time, he gives you another alibi, right?
Yes, that's correct.
About working on a farm,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
With a coworker there too, correct?
Yes, I believe he said he was working with a Douglas guy.
And did you check that out?
Wait, he was working with what? Somebody coughed.
OJ or Mike Douglas, one of those.
Okay.
Some Douglas man, I believe.
In fact, it was Mr. Douglas's farm and working with another man.
Right.
We're talking about the same people, right?
Correct.
And when you checked that the first time, did that check out?
Yes.
But it didn't stop there, did it?
What do you mean?
I mean, you got information after that, didn't you?
Yes.
And the information after that was that, no, I was wrong. He wasn't at my farm this morning. You need to look at him. Correct?
Yes.
So you have three people, Shane, Dylan, and Zach, alibying each other
Yes, sir.
that day. And then you have Jason Autry, alibi not checking out at all. Correct?
I wouldn't say that. Jason Autry, at one point, he's north of the interstate calling Lisa Autry or Angela Scott, one of his ex-girlfriends. So his phone record showed that he was a different part other than where Holly was. And on top of that,
Well,
Jason
let's take
Autry's
one at a time.
huge.
You remember what you're about to say.
Okay, all right.
Let's think, because I want to help you.
Can you just finish the answer first?
I mean, I want him to come back to it, but if
Okay.
I could take it in pieces, I think it'd be easier. Even though these farmers had told you, no, he wasn't with us, you said that you have his cell phone north of the interstate that morning, correct?
Yes, sir.
Talking to, as you remember it, either his wife or his girlfriend, Angela Scott.
Right.
Correct?
Yes, sir. That's right.
And you're right about that. At 6:50 in the morning. Okay? He is up in Camden, north of the interstate,
Okay.
leaving his girlfriend's house. Okay?
Okay.
So think about this.
Okay. I'm
Think
with
about
you.
this.
All right.
Are crimes always committed by one person?
Sexual crimes are invariably committed by one person. Sexual predators work alone.
So that was an assumption that you were making back then, correct?
Yes.
That
That
this was a sexual abduction, whatever you want to call it, right?
Well, when you rule out all the other motives for a kidnapping, you're left with an abduction for sexual purposes, Sexual predators invariably work alone.
As I think I understand what you said.
Okay?
I think the answer to that is yes. It was an assumption that you were making.
It was an assumption that the behavior analysis unit
Based
told
on-
us to make.
This
Based on
assumption-
research of all the crimes that they've looked at over and over again, these sexual crimes, they tell us, rule out, don't even consider looking at two people. Don't even look at it. Look at one person. It happened from one person.
And is that assumption back then what led you to ignore these alibis between Dylan and Zach and Shane about being with each other, about Jason's alibi not checking out? I mean, is that what happened? Is that why you ignored that?
I didn't ignore it, sir. I didn't ignore it at all. But I've got eyes, and I look at Jason Autry. Okay, if Clint Bobo is lying about what the abductor looked like, then I don't know who did it. Okay, we'll never know. But if he's telling the truth, it was not Jason Autry. You can go through that as much as you want to, but it always comes back to that.
It's the same assumption that one man did it. What it always comes back to, what you just talked about, the person that took her into the woods, doesn't fit the description of Jason Autry.
It doesn't.
Doesn't fit the description of Zach Adams.
It doesn't.
But you know what? You know who Clint Bobo said it fit the description of? Shane Austin.
Okay. If Shane Austin had a car at the time, that would.
If Shane Austin had a car at the time, well, he did. But you know what Zach had at the time?
Your Honor, can you please ask questions? He's not asking questions.
No, he just did. Said, you know what kind of car Zach Adams had at the
Zach
time?
had at the time?
Misunderstood. Sorry.
Zach had I believe it was supposed to be tore up, but he had a white Nissan pickup at the time.
Supposed to be tore up.
Right.
He actually had two trucks. He had a black one and a white one. Do you remember that or not?
Well, there was one lead that came in that Jason Autry and Zach Adams were fishing one day, pulling a boat with a black truck. So I would assume you might be right there.
Two trucks,
Okay.
including the white one, that you said was supposed to be tore up.
Right.
Would it surprise you to learn that Zach Adams told investigators that around that time he was driving that white truck?
Nothing would surprise me at this point.
Exactly. If we sit here in 2017 knowing a lot more about this case, you stopped on this case in 2013,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Your testimony has been almost a trip into the past, into the first 2 or 3 years of this investigation. But you can't tell us anything about the 3 and 4 years after that.
You're right. I don't know what y'all have done since then. What the state's done since then.
And he was driving a white truck? That's very interesting, isn't
Your
it?
Honor, I object to this. The
That
prosecutors.
was a statement asking a question.
Well, but
Is that
also
the-
the prosecutor's putting into evidence that Zach Adams admitted at some point he was driving a white truck. I don't think that's accurate, Your Honor. I do not believe it's accurate that he ever said on that day he
The
was driving a
jury
white
can
truck.
go by what the evidence is, okay? Go.
Zach Adams driving a white truck? Is that interesting?
Is it interesting? Yeah, it could be.
Were you aware that Mr. John Babb saw a white truck leaving the scene fast that morning?
Yes, sir.
Were you aware that Natalie Bobo had seen Zach's truck driving by her in Hollywood?
No, I wasn't aware of that. Or I don't remember it if I was aware of it at the time. I remember John Babb, though.
But you assume his truck was tore up, correct?
The information I had was his truck was tore up, and I had no reason to doubt it. I don't know if it was or not, but I didn't meet him until July.
Let me correct you a little bit. You said you have no reason to doubt it. You mean you had no reason, because your involvement stopped in 2000?
Correct, correct. I had no reason then to doubt what I'd heard.
You showed a picture, and there was a picture from that AM Farm video, right?
Yes, sir.
That's one of the Wade Parsons.
It is.
It's from a time that's well after the critical time.
Yeah, yes,
I
sir.
believe you said about it's 25 or 45, whatever it is, but
Yeah, I believe the one that Ms. Thompson was saying that might have been hers was around 11, or
Exactly.
after 11.
the
Somewhere.
critical time period you were talking about, though, ended around 9:30 or 9:45 when the phone was gone, right?
Yes, sir, 9:40.
And this picture is from at least an hour and 15 or an hour and 20, whatever it is.
Right,
Minutes
right.
later, right?
Right.
And it's a dark truck that you can see on a distance, just like you can. Well, you spent hours looking at this AM Farm video.
Yeah, and you can all you can tell is it's a dark truck. You know.
You don't know whose truck it is.
Correct.
Could be my truck, right?
Where were you at that day?
Exactly.
Just kidding.
Could be my truck, correct?
Right.
Could be anybody's truck, correct?
Well, not anybody. It wasn't mine, but just about anybody else, I guess I would.
Anybody's truck, including Dylan Adams' truck. Were you aware he had a dark pickup truck?
Yes, that's what the information we had was. They were in Dylan's truck that day.
Dylan Adams' pickup truck headed south, correct?
Yes.
Dylan Adams' pickup truck headed south. He would have gone by the area where some of that property was found, right?
Yes, where her cell phone was thrown out.
That morning.
It was thrown. I believe it was thrown out that morning. It could have been thrown out up to maybe 10 or 11 days after it, because it wasn't found until around the 24th.
They alibied each other.
Yes, sir.
This white truck is interesting. But Zach never told you he went to the river that morning, did he?
Zach? No, he did not.
No. And Jason never told you he went to the river that morning, did he?
As best I can remember, both of them said they met up at Victor Densmore's house. Victor was doing some work for Dottie that owns Dottie's Marine. He was building a garage or something. They met up there. Shane and Zach got into a fight, but then after the words, they went to a bar and, well, they went and got some drugs, and then they went to a bar and played cards till 10 o'clock that night.
And the day ended, right?
Right.
At that point, you know,
Well,
whatever it is, day ends.
Mr. Austin told me his mom came and got him, so that was the end of his.
So let's go back to, I want to talk about something that you just said.
Okay.
But I think you misheard my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Did either Zach or Jason tell you that they went to the river that morning?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But Zach did say the day ended sort of like you described it, correct?
Yes.
Did he not tell you that the police had to come to his house that night?
Who? Which one?
Zach.
Did Zach tell?
Objection, Your Honor. I think Mr. Dicus testified that it was Shane Austin that told him he went to play cards with Mr. Adams. I think it's an
You
accurate.
can ask the question.
Zach Adams tell you the police had to come to his house that night?
If he did, I don't recall it.
Did he tell you that he was trying to get guns that night?
No.
Did he tell you that he was all emotional and crazy that night?
Objection, Your Honor. That's some type of conclusion that the district attorney is drawing.
Just saying, did Zach tell him that?
No.
No, sir.
That'd be interesting.
Interesting, yes, sir. A couple things you said would be interesting.
But as we said, because we sit here in 2017, you stopped looking at them.
I looked at Zach personally a total of 2 or 3 times So whenever that was over, whenever the last one was over with, I stopped looking at them.
You stopped looking at them even though that property had been found close to Shanks.
Correct.
You stopped looking at them even though Warren Rainey had seen what he saw. Zach running around, acting however you want to call it. Correct?
Yes, sir.
You stopped looking at them even though their alibis were with each other. Right?
Yes, sir.
You stopped looking at them even though Jason Autry's alibi was, I think your word earlier for Mr. Britt's, garbage.
Well, if you've got phone records saying he called at 6:50, and what I remember when I had Mr. Kevin Helms with Shelby County Sheriff's Department check out their phone records, what he told me is that they're not, it's not consistent with Holly's phone records. That's what I recall. If that's wrong, then so be it. But that's what I remember about checking out the phones.
And at that time, as you explained to us, you're making an assumption based on things you've been told and experts or whatever. You're making an assumption that one person committed this crime.
Well, I would prefer you call it a logical conclusion.
Very good.
Okay.
You're making a logical conclusion at that point in, oh, you want to have to put a exact date on it, 2011 or 2012, that one person committed this crime.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
So if Jason Autry's phone started off in Camden, well, he must not have done it. Correct?
That's not the only thing, but yes.
That's what I'm saying. Right?
Yeah, right. I agree with that.
You didn't account for that time, and this is hindsight. You're not on trial,
No, I understand.
okay? This is hindsight. This is 2017, all right? You didn't account for the fact that more than one person could have been involved.
I wouldn't say that I didn't account for that. That's,
Okay.
I mean,
Well, if you stop looking, if one of the reasons is you stop looking at Jason is that he started out in Camden, well, what if he was abducted by Zach and Shane and Jason met them later that morning? You see what I'm saying? Like, if more than one person had committed this crime, there'd be different dynamics going on. Correct? I mean,
I don't know that I agree with that because there's a dynamic of the reward going on, and
now that doesn't have anything to do with, you mentioned Jason's phone records start out in Camden.
right,
So I'm like, well, that doesn't fit,
okay,
okay? And the behavioral scientist or whoever it was gave you information that caused you to make a logical conclusion that one person committed this type of crime. Okay?
Okay.
So based on those phone records and him being in Camden, that told you something, right?
right,
But the problem is, if this crime is committed by more people, if Jason committed this crime but somebody else abducted him, if he came to them later on, then the information you had back then didn't tell you anything.
Is that a
Correct?
question, Your Honor?
Didn't tell you anything, correct?
I don't know how to respond to that without giving you my opinion as to the merits of that. So I don't know what to tell you.
Part of this 2017 versus 2012, I don't know what date you want to put on.
I don't know everything that y'all have found out about these guys. I will say that.
The name Natalie Bobo came up. I meant to ask you this before when they were talking about other suspects or something.
Right.
And I saw the way you reacted. She's not an other suspect, correct?
Right.
But it came up like that, all right? Were you aware that she had been stripping at Teasers, which is less than a mile from Mr. Adams' house?
Man, Yes, I know that. I don't see how it has anything to do with what we're here for today, but yes, I knew that.
Were you aware that previously she had lived, before this crime happened, in a little house with Rebecca Earp?
Yes.
Were you aware that she had met Zach Adams on more than one occasion before this?
I think I was. I know that she knew him somehow.
Were you aware that she'd been trading sex for drugs with this man?
Objection, Your Honor.
He can ask if he's aware of that.
It's not
I,
relevant.
I never witnessed that, no.
You weren't aware of that?
Not aware of it.
But we moved on to Terry Britt. His size was good for the abductor size, right?
His size was exactly what we were looking for.
You said we moved on to Terry Britt, so that's who you're talking about. Okay.
His size was good for the abductor size, correct?
His size perfectly matched what Clint described. Perfectly.
Just like Shane's.
No, not just like Shane's.
If Clint Bobo testified same body type and everything as Shane Austin,
Excuse me?
if Clint Bobo testified the same body shape and everything as Shane Austin, that surprise you?
Well, Clint's a very honest young man. I would, if he says that, I believe him.
And
But you're forgetting part of it,
go ahead.
because the body type also goes with the hair. And Shane Austin had reddish, blondish hair. And Clint said he had black hair, shoulder-length black hair.
Reddish brownish hair.
Shane Austin? Yeah, reddish, blondish, not black hair. He did not have black hair, for sure.
And were you aware that Zach Adams told Karen Bobo that that man that walked her into the woods was, quote, Shane?
Your Honor, I object to this.
You heard the testimony from Mr. Bobo herself.
That she said, that he said that the man that walked her into the woods was Shane? I don't remember that testimony on direct from Ms. Bobo.
She testified about speaking with Mr. Adams at the end of her testimony. She said she walked away with two things. The first thing was that he had some sort of spoof card that he could call people from different numbers. And she said the second thing was that Zach said that Shane was the one that walked her into the woods.
Okay, you can ask.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
He had a change in appearance, correct?
Britt, yes.
And you said that you don't know or don't remember whichever one, and I know this is years,
Sure.
whether or not the change of appearance was weeks before or weeks after. You just can't say, correct?
Well, I can say what the people were telling me, what they said. I remember what they told me, and they can't remember if it was, if it was before or after, right around that time.
Except for Mr. Britt's son, though, right?
Terry Kenneth,
Terry Kenneth. You remember talking to him?
I do.
Right in IR 420. That's early on in the investigation because now it's up to almost 3,000 or something.
Yeah.
IR 420. Isn't it true? His son told you.
Objection to hearsay, Your Honor.
He's talked about information other people provided him about Mr. Britt's change of appearance. So this is what this goes
He
toward.
can be
Which the state
cross-examined.
objected to.
He can be cross-examined on this.
Isn't it true that you asked Mr. Terry Kenneth Britt, his son, whether or not his father, Mr. Britt, had changed his appearance at all?
I'm sure I would have asked him that, yep.
And isn't it true that he replied, Dad had a long ponytail after he got out of prison. I'm not sure when he cut it, but it was maybe around 2 years ago. And that IR is written in February of 2012.
He did cut his ponytail. He did cut his ponytail out. When we did the search warrant, we got it. So he did cut the ponytail, but I don't know when. His hair now, or the last time I saw him, is the size of mine, is the length of mine. So what I'm...
So I understand now, the idea that he's changed his appearance.
Right.
You admit that you had information that he had changed his appearance, cut his hair, ponytail, some 2 years before.
Right.
But you didn't know if he took other steps weeks before or weeks after with regard to the length of his hair.
There you go. Yes, sir. That's correct.
Talk about his phone and his wife's phone, correct? And when I heard you talk about it, you were talking about times from like noon on that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it fair to say that there was no activity on his phone or his wife's phone that morning, like 8, 9, 10, 11, all that stuff?
That's correct. There was no activity.
So we know about it if there were.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
We would have got that information.
And would you agree with me, there's absolutely nothing about that that's inconsistent about those phone records? Inconsistent with Mr. Britt and his wife traveling up to Allgood that morning if they did it before noon, because you would have no idea, right? You understand what I'm saying about the phone records?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Between 8 and 12, you don't know where the phones are.
Right.
So for all you know, they could be at Allgood Salvage or the Allgood Salvage right down the street, or they could be at wherever. I mean, you just don't know.
I don't know where their phones are at that time. Correct. But they went to Camden after lunch.
Well, I'm talking about that morning.
Right. But they,
I'm talking about that morning.
right.
You don't know.
I don't know. That's true.
You had Clint listen to voices. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And one of the voices was like a police officer's voice or something. Somebody that you knew didn't commit the crime.
Yes, sir.
And Clint said, well, I think it may be that one, but I can't tell the difference between this other one. And so you went back to him again and again, I think maybe even 3 times.
Actually, it was 2.
And it's true that he never told you. I'm 100% certain that's the voice I heard in that garage, right?
That's correct.
And when you played those voices to him, did you play Shane Austin's voice?
No.
No. You did a wiretap on his house, right?
Yes.
Wiretapped his phones, right?
Yes.
Searched his house.
Yes.
Not a single drop of Holly's blood, right?
Correct.
Not a single Holly Bobo fingerprint, correct?
Correct.
Not anything linked to her DNA in that house, correct?
Nuclear DNA, no.
Not a single one of her personal possessions or anything that she owned that she had with her that morning.
Correct.
Nothing.
Correct.
(2017). You leave the TBI in 2013.
Yes, sir.
3.5, 4 years later, we're here today. Correct?
Yes, sir.
You aware that Zach Adams' cell phone that morning, when it was utilized at about 8:19 through 9 a.m., was hitting on the same tower that Holly's phone was pinging on?
Objection, Your Honor.
You can ask him if he's aware.
You aware of that?
No, there was one point in time where Zach's phone was on a different tower than Holly's phone was on.
Absolutely there was, while Dylan was getting rid of it. And he and Jason were driving her
Objection,
to
Your
the
Honor.
river.
That's a mischaracterization.
Question, you can ask a question.
Between 8:19 and 9 o'clock, were you aware that Zach Adams' phone and Holly's phone were pinging on the same tower?
Well, if Zach was at home, that would make sense.
If Zach
'Cause-
were at home, or if Zach were at Shane's, or if Zach were at Shane's grandmama's barn, they're all the same
Your Honor,
place.
he's being asked to testify as to the location. I tried to get him to testify, or the state objected when I was going into location on direct. And now they're asking him to testify as back where the phones say on location. If they're gonna proceed with this line of questioning, I absolutely want to ask him questions on redirect about the location of those telephones.
If we got too far into specifics about the location, I understand the objection.
Okay.
I'll keep it general.
Okay,
Like
general. All right.
But I don't understand the question because Holly's cell phone moved. 8:17, she's on the home tower. 8:26, she's on the next tower. And then at 8:57, she's on a different cell tower. And then 9:02, 9:06, she's on a different tower. And then 9:25, she's on a different tower. So I don't understand the question because
I'm asking you questions that, would you admit with me, are probably better answered by Mr. Frizzell?
a better answer because if you say the one tower that Holly, that doesn't make sense to me because she was on several.
That stuff with Mr. Frizzell, correct?
It's a very good man to ask.
So if he drew circles of where her pings were, and at the same time he showed us where Zach Adams, what tower his phone was
Objection,
using.
Your Honor. This is again asking him questions and supposition about locations of the cell phone.
No,
Objection overruled.
he would be the person I'd ask about that.
He'd be the person I would ask about
He'd
that.
be the person even you would ask about that.
Correct.
Pick a prettier bitch. It was fun. Were you aware of that?
No.
You're aware that Zach Adams said when asked, "I can't clear my name because I'm too far involved in it."
No. I never remember that.
Were you aware that Zach Adams said, "I let Shane hit it"?
No. No.
Were you aware that Zach Adams confessed his involvement in this crime to two different people?
No, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. I say that's a mischaracterization of the evidence.
It's up to the jury what the evidence shows, okay?
Yes.
But the other thing is, given the date he departed his employment, I'm not sure some of that existed at that time.
I think that's exactly right.
Okay.
Those things didn't exist in 2013. We
Correct.
stand here in a different place now, right? Her body was recovered before or after you left?
After.
After you left. Were you aware of where it was found?
I have been made aware since then.
Off the interstate, cell phone tower, back in the woods?
Yes, sir. a little bit farther north than I thought she was taking, just a little bit farther.
Between two sawmills.
Yes, sir.
Were you aware that Dylan Adams hung out at one of those sawmills?
Yeah, with Corey Tubbs, I believe.
Were you aware that Zach Adams had been seen at that sawmill?
I don't remember that.
I've heard you say, I think you admit it, sometimes I think, or my opinion, or my logical conclusion. You said that, right?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me, though, that we got to base what we do on evidence and on proof?
Yes, sir.
That's what.
Further direct.
Now, during your investigation of Terry Britt, you actually got a lot of his financial records.
Yes,
Did you?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and some of those records came from stores like Walmart.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then you were able to review a lot of the past purchases he had made there, weren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And when I say I got them, an FBI agent obtained some of them, and Brent Booth obtained some of them.
And you got them from places like Radio Shack. Can you remember some of the places you got his records from?
Yeah, Radio Shack was one. Ace Hardware.
Ace Hardware. We said Walmart. What about his banking records? Did you get banking records?
We did.
Okay. While they're reviewing those, I want to ask you, you knew about the John Babb white truck connection, didn't you?
That came out. They came out very early. We heard that day.
Okay, and so why was it that you were not concerned about the white truck that John Babb saw? Explain to the jury.
First of all, it would have been going according to what he told us around 7:30. It was well before the kidnapping, and he was so far away from it. He just knew it had a loud sound. It was a white full-size pickup truck. Not a whole lot of extra information to go on. And we've got Ed Barnes going from his house.
So first of all, which direction was the white pickup truck going?
He said it was going southbound.
Okay. And
So-
what did you know about Holly's phone?
Holly's phone was traveling northbound. Right at about 7:45 to 8.
This is where I think we're getting into phone technicalities, Judge, where this witness is not familiar with this technology.
They offered this,
He can say things generally,
okay,
okay? He
Yeah.
is not a cell phone tower,
Right.
cell phone expert.
but you knew in general Holly's phone was traveling northbound.
Yeah, we drove the route
Okay, so, but
20 times, so we knew it had to go north to be able to get to the tower, to the
okay,
next tower.
so in order to, and you said you also, Ed James Barnes, how did you put John Babb's information together with what James Barnes had said?
Okay, so James Barnes is outside getting oil for his truck, getting ready to go work, and at 7:47, he's calling his mom and saying that he heard the screams. Well, the whole time, he's pretty confident that there was nothing else, no other vehicles coming down the road. On top of that, there was another neighbor that lived at the end of the road who was outside from like 7:25 to 7:45.
I don't know if we're getting into hearsay, that's what it sounds like.
It's not hearsay, this has all already been testified to. It just, this is He took information, this information from John Babb and Ed Barnes is already into the record, and this is how he analyzed it to,
If it's something that's already testified, that's fine, Judge, but I think he was talking about somebody else.
We'll just stick with
Yeah.
James Barnes and
Okay, James Barnes
John
and another
Babb.
neighbor was outside, and neither one of them reported that they saw another vehicle.
okay.
So what that probably says is sometime after 7:47, when Barnes is gone, the vehicle comes into play to remove Holly from the scene, which fits with her cell phone moving the area around 8 o'clock. You know, at 8 o'clock, it starts moving from the house.
So you made the determination that the truck that John Babb saw was too early in time to be related to Holly's kidnapping?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to pass forward some receipts. Pass this one first. These two, there are two receipts. Now, do you recognize these two receipts?
These are two receipts that we got from the Britts. I'm not sure which one, but
Okay. Now, this is when you did the Walmart record pull, is that right?
that's correct. And they purchased a cell phone on March the 11th, 2011, and then purchased another one on March the 12th, 2011.
Okay. And did they also, is there anything else you see that they purchased along with the cellular telephone?
Looks like they got 1,000 minutes on it, 1,000 minutes.
On one or both phones?
I don't see it on both of them.
It's not the top line?
ST 684.
Okay, anyway.
I don't see it.
And what
on
are the
one of
dates on those two?
them. March 11th, 2011.
Okay, will you
March
pass me that one? I'll have that one marked first, the 11th.
Copy 225.
Okay. And then the one on the 12th.
The 225.
And then I'm going to pass you up another receipt. Okay, and what is that a receipt for?
This is a receipt from Walmart again, where 1,000 minutes were purchased. Two different lots of 1,000 minutes were purchased on April the 11th, 2011.
And these again came from Mr. Britt's home?
Correct.
Or not from Mr., these
From-
were Mr.
from the-
Britt's receipts that you got from Walmart, is that right?
That's correct.
I'd like to have this receipt marked. And then I'm going to pass you one more.
That'd be 226, letter marking.
Okay, and then this is a final Walmart receipt. What do you see that's interesting or significant on this receipt?
Well, he bought a, looks like he bought a chainsaw and some motor oil, different things for a chainsaw.
Okay, and I'd like this one. And what's the date on that?
227,
April the 29th, 2011.
April
29th.
29th.
Now, just to be clear, one of the ways that you ruled Zach Adams
I
out,
would like to object to the leading.
I don't know if she's leading or not.
Okay.
Finish the question.
you testified on your cross-examination regarding some of the locations, and I don't want you to get into details and technical issues, but you used the cell phone records of Holly and Zach Adams to make a determination regarding whether or not it would have been possible for him to be involved.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And using those records, you were referring to something at 8:26. What specifically were you referring to?
826, Holly's cell phone is transitioned from her home tower up to the northwest tower. So she's on the northwest portion of Decatur County.
And what about around the exact same time, where was Zach Adams' telephone?
I believe he was on the Cox Road Tower, which is the northeast corner of Decatur County. That tower is right on the interstate, so towers on the interstate, they have less range than other towers because they have to take all the calls that
Okay.
come through on the interstate.
So how far apart physically are those two towers from one another?
I'm not sure, but I would say probably 10 to 15 miles.
Okay. And so that was, and did that happen again at another time also? That morning, was there another time when when the two towers the phones were utilizing were miles apart from each other?
It might have been. I was just looking for one time,
Okay.
So it might have been more than one.
Okay. And Zach Adams, what did he tell you he had done that morning?
He woke up, Rebecca went to work, his girlfriend at the time. Dylan gets up, he talks to Shane Austin. They decide they're going to go get messed up that day. So Dylan and Zach go to Shane's house, they
And
pick him up.
Did they say what car they were in?
They were in Dylan's truck.
Okay. They go to Shane's house. What happens next?
They pick up Shane, they go to the interstate, get gas, get $5 worth of gas. They see the SUVs coming southbound. They go from there to another convenience store. And I asked both of them how they were acting that day. How was the other one acting? Did they act strange or unusual? So at the second gas station there in Parsons, they got more gas and then went and bought Xanax. Shane supposedly had money, so they bought $200 worth of Xanax and got messed up. And that was their day.
Okay.
Besides going to the house that Victor Densmore was working on and seeing Jason Autry at that point.
Now, driving Shane home, is that a place that you would pass? Would you pass Dottie Cooley's house if you were driving Shane home from Parsons?
Can you give me the address of it? I don't remember.
If she's on Pugh Road, if her house.
She's on Pugh Road. Depending on which way you go, you should have passed it.
Okay.
It's right there, close to Shane's.
Now, would it surprise you if that 911 call that came in on the night of April the 13th at Zach Adams' house, if it were said 3 times on that call that Zach Adams was looking for a vehicle to drive, that he had no vehicle?
No, that would be consistent with what I knew at the time.
Okay. And would it surprise you if on that 911 call, it was said that Zach Adams did not have a gun?
No, it wouldn't surprise me. He's a convicted felon, I believe.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that.
The physical description of Zach, what did Zach Adams' appearance, what was his physical appearance in April of 2011?
He
Does
was...
he look like what he looks now?
No, he is fattened up nicely. He was 135 pounds is what I documented when I talked to him. 6'2", 6'3", really tall. His hair was much shorter, but his face looked totally different. It was sunken in. He looked sort of like the Joker back then. You know,
The
really,
Joker?
yeah, really skinny.
From
Whatever
the Batman TV show or from
the
the
comics,
movies?
the comics,
The comics, okay.
right?
And what about Jason Autry's physical appearance in April of 2011?
It was impressive. He is huge. He was a lot taller than Brent Booth, and Brent Booth is probably 6'3", 6'4", so I would say Autry is every bit of 6'6", if not maybe taller.
Okay. And Shane Austin's physical description. What was his physical description back in 2011?
Shane was right about my height, maybe. I saw
How
some
tall are you?
about 5'10", if I stretch it out really good. So we were about even.
What
he-
about his weight?
His weight, well, I would say, would it be around, I'm not good at that, but I would say probably between 180 and 220, 225, somewhere in there. So his weight could have been within the frame of what we're looking at.
What about his hair color and hair length?
He had real short, reddish hair.
Would you consider it black?
No, absolutely not.
And what about Dylan's physical appearance, Dylan Adams?
He's rather tall himself. Not exactly as tall as Zach, but probably 6'1". He was slender, but not as thin as Zach. So I'd say he probably weighed 165. 6'1", 165 is the best I can give you.
And how is his hair styled?
He had short hair at the time I saw him. He had dark hair.
Okay. So Terry Britt's alibi, to be clear about the alibi that Terry Britt gave you, where did he say that he started that day? Where did he go?
He said that he got up, got coffee that morning, and I asked him what time he got up, and he says, well, my feet can't hit the floor without my wife knowing it. You know, he made a false statement that he was trying to deflect, but at that point, you know, he says, well, I don't know exactly what time. He said, I usually get up between 6 and 7, sometimes earlier, probably institutionalized. You know, breakfast is at 7 o'clock in the morning, you better be up to eat it. So, but he got up really early. Jan got up sometime later on. Jan gets up with the dogs barking. He had chihuahuas in the house. She gets up with the dogs barking. So Jan couldn't tell me what time she woke up that morning, but she thought it was around between 9 and 10. Well, if it'd been 10, you know, with the dogs barking, that was interesting.
Okay, so where did he say they went first?
The first place they went is to All Good Salvage to check out the bathtubs. They saw them, but they called Bucks because
They said they called Bucks?
no, they went to Bucks.
Okay,
I'm sorry, they went to Bucks
okay.
after going to All Goods, and Bucks only had a 2-piece or only had a 3-piece. They couldn't. It wasn't exactly fit. Now Bucks does not carry bathtubs in their store, but he says he sees them and it wasn't what he had, so he went back to All Goods, bought the bathtub. He's coming back that morning, and the officers come to him, and they were together the rest of the day.
And he did not say they went back to Camden anytime in the afternoon?
No,
Okay.
no, he said the officers got there by lunch, okay, and then that was it. They were together the rest of the day.
Okay.
But the officers got there 3:30.
Now, when you were searching Terry Britt's house, did you find some hairs that were consistent with Holly Bobo's hair?
We asked him for scientific testimony with regard to the comparison of hair, Mr. Sager.
I'm not asking for microscopical, but
Are you aware of hairs that were found there that were consistent with being Holly Bobo's hair, and if so, where?
So there were hairs that were found that were microscopically and macroscopically identical to Holly's, found in the vans that we took to the crime lab.
And which van was that?
It was the caravan. It was in some rope debris in the back.
In rope?
A rope, yes, a rope.
Okay. Now,
But we tested that with DNA, and it did not match Holly's.
okay, did you do regular DNA testing?
I don't think he did any DNA testing. Since the FBI at this point, we're getting the hearsay, it wasn't hers.
He's already said DNA excluded, okay?
Okay. Were you aware that Zach Adams had said some very crude things about Holly Bobo when you were doing your investigation?
I mentioned that to him quite forcefully.
Okay, you were asked about were you aware of any specific statements, but do you remember generally what you were aware of?
I know he told one female that you're going to end up in a hole just like Holly, or you're going to end up in a well just like Holly. He told someone, or allegedly told, I wasn't there, he allegedly told another guy something very bad about Holly.
Okay, and during your investigation, did you find that other people had also said or made crude statements about Holly Bobo?
I'm not objecting to the general question, but if we're going to start getting the hearsay statements, I'll go.
You can answer.
This case was different than any other case I've ever heard of in my life, because people like Zach Adams talking, running their mouth, there was many people that would do that. And, you know, I just say thank you. Good. We don't have anything else to do. Let's go interview this idiot who's saying her head's in a freezer, you know.
So was there actually someone who said that Holly's head was in the freezer?
Yeah, head's in the freezer. She's in my basement. We had all kind of garbage, all kinds of.
We're gonna be here for weeks if we go into every lead that came in.
right, I'm not doing that, but Your Honor, the state has made a big deal
About what Mr. Adams has said, and I would like to go a little bit into the fact that there were multiple other people who were making crude comments and taking, quote, credit.
You've answered that, and I think he might have varied from your question.
Okay. Were there people who were taking credit for Holly Bobo's disappearance?
There were several people that were making statements to that effect, yes.
And did you check those people out? Did it turn out that they were in fact responsible?
Right, we checked them out, and they were not responsible.
Okay. And how many times do you think you got in reports where people had made statements or claimed responsibility or?
I would estimate more than 10, but less than 20.
Okay. And so when you were investigating Mr. Adams, you were aware of some of these statements that had been made
Yes, I was.
by him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And let me ask you this. In all your years of investigation, when somebody is in jail and comes forward with information in jail,
I don't object to any sort of opinion testimony. I think it's exactly what this is.
It's not opinion
What do we
testimony.
ask you?
You aren't going to approach?
I would like to get this witness finished, okay?
right? So I'm just asking him if, in his years of experience, when people come forward in jail and are jailhouse snitches and say, somebody has said something to me in jail, is that something he takes seriously, or is that something that he investigates pretty thoroughly, because that is a frequent occurrence?
All right, answer.
I've had plenty of jailhouse snitches that ended up giving really good information.
Okay.
I've had others that just blowing smoke. They didn't really know, but yeah, it's helped in a number of investigations.
Okay. So it can go either way. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. No further questions.
Further cross?
Very quick. You mentioned a second ago, or some minutes ago, about her cell phone again and how it traveled.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that answers to those questions, where her cell phone was at a particular time, where it wasn't, where Zach Adams' phone was at a particular time and where it wasn't, or anybody's phone that we want to know about where it was and where it wasn't, would you agree with me that Mike Frizzell is a better person to answer that question than you?
It's hard too, but I would agree to.
And you were asked what Zach told you with regard to his whereabouts that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the three of them, quote, alibied each other,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And finally, were you aware that Mr. Austin admitted to going to the Coon home?
Yes, sir. He admitted that to me, actually.
That's all.
One final follow-up question, Your Honor. Now, you said that these three people alibied each other, but actually, they didn't alibi each other for the time period when Holly's phone was actually moving, did they?
Right. Right. That's accurate. They weren't all together at the same time. You know, Zach's over here and Shane's over here.
It
So
was actually later in the day when they said they got together.
that's correct.
So all three of them, for the time period that Holly's phone was moving and the actual time she was taken from her house, they didn't have an alibi for that time, did they?
Well, they had an alibi, whether you believe it or not, I don't know. But
I'm sorry, I phrased that wrong. They didn't have another person that they were necessarily with during that time.
who?
Shane Austin didn't.
Shane Austin was by himself. Correct.
No further questions.
All right, we're gonna take a lunch recess, take 1 hour for lunch, follow the admonitions that I gave you at the outset.